Welcome to day 3. It's the end. I promise. We won't be here tomorrow. unless disaster strikes. We won't be here tomorrow. So welcome to day 3. We got some fairly good stuff still on the agenda today. So we're going to start out with the library. They have a presentation, and then we'll go back and visit their operating budget. After that, I'd like to do that quick in-camera session, and then we'll move into capital and continue down and finish off. Hopefully we're out of here by noon, but that's the plan. I think we can make it. But having said that, it's going to take whatever time it takes. Sorry. All right, so this time I'd like to invite Martin Walters and Len to come on up. And
just in front here?
You can steal Mr. Harris's chair, or actually, that wasn't
the hot seat.
we'll bring the chair right up.
Is there something, you want something on the overhead, or does it matter? You guys have this, I forwarded it.
Do we have the, I don't think I got the PowerPoint. Do we have the PowerPoint? Can we get the, do they have the PowerPoint? Can
I gave it to Len, to Alan. I gave it to Alan, I don't know, last week. Give me a second, I can draw it.
I never got it. I don't feel special. I'm just kidding.
It was just the PDF, it wasn't.
No, I'm just ordering it.
So you can go down like just clicking operating, just clicking.
Okay.
Well,
All
I'd
right.
rather see the presentation before I talk about their budget. So,
Anyway, I was obviously, hope you might have had a chance to look at this, but it's pretty straightforward. Obviously, you guys can read that or not, but I'll talk about what's the small print there. But I think the real important stuff is really what's in the graphic at the top. Right now, Beaumont is the library is essentially bursting at the seams in regards to the services we provide. So those stats at the top, just to give you a sense, we're pushing 60,000 visitors coming in the doors every year. We have 1,500, just over 1,500 youth cards, so that's ages 8 to 15. 1,000 Facebook followers. We have 3,000 hours, 3,150 hours that were opened a year. 16,000 Wi-Fi sessions, 22,000 virtual visits. So our numbers are on par in ratio to any of the bigger places like Spruce Grove in the Yellowhead Regional Library System, and Stony Plain, even ones that we match. So we have been, going at sort of the top tier level of service to the community. So the budget this year is really reflecting what's holding us back. And the two things that hold us back the most are staffing levels and space. So this was my second page, which you would have had. And so it talks about, again, the graphic at the top talks about our collection size. We currently have 27,000 items, 27,157. Which is obviously an indication of the limits of size, right? So for example, Stony Plain, similar population, they have 50,000 items. They got a bigger place to do it, but their circulation is only about just over 200,000 items a year, whereas we're already circulating 113,868. So if you were to double the size of the collection, that would manifest itself in the usage almost instantaneously. It's not like if we expanded and got more size and got bigger, we'd have to wait, a couple of years to catch up to get a trend going in the community to have them use it. The usage would match instantly. We're just bursting at the seams, and which is obviously a testimony to all that we do there. But my point here is simply that an increase in the people, the amount of staffing, and the increase in the space is going to be matched within the community with an increase of usage. So anyway, back to the budget. Specifically, I'll just skip down to these other graphics here. So, Oh, so interlibrary loans is another big thing, just to mention that. We do about 43,000 interlibrary loans a year. In the last few years, the big push in the province has been province-wide sharing. So someone can be in Calgary and they can use their Beaumont Public Library card in the Calgary Library, borrow that book, and then drop it off pretty much any other public library in the province. So being a physical portal for the members of this community gives them access to basically the entire province when it comes to public library sharing of material. So even though we have 27,000 items in here, and theoretically we should have more based on the population, we are the sort of the center for access to the rest of the province for the citizens of Beaumont. So they have access to millions of items throughout the province through interlibrary loan, and we make very good use of interlibrary loan here in Beaumont. I just said another one there, which is kind of exciting, is the 56,000 items. That's certainly, you probably can't read it, but the 56,348 items, these are circulations of children's materials, right? So we have a heavy usage of our children's collection. And quite often the library is seen as sort of on par with a recreational facility, like there was an aqua fit center or swimming or whatever. But I think in this day and age, the mindset has to change and realize that the library is actually it is a recreational center, but it's more akin to an educational institution, right? It's the free university for the people that are, upgrading their careers or stuff like that, right? It's the early literacy school, which doesn't really exist, there's the little programs here and there, but the programs that we do for the preschool kids, right, and with the school readiness that we've participated with through the early education, or the ECMAC project that's been going on in Edmonton for a while. So that's one thing that the community needs to understand, or that I'd like to express here, is that we are very much a part of the educational system, and that reflects in what we do and sort of our numbers. So. So just a couple stats on this one. So the programs, we had 11,000 participants in our programs. We run about 1,000 sessions, 2,000 volunteer hours. We also run an art gallery over there, which was an initiative we did a couple years ago. So we had about 3,000 visitors come through our art gallery. We do provincial art comes in through the Alberta TREX program, traveling exhibitions. And then there's about 2 to 3 months of the year where we host the high school art program, which gets a big buzz in the community. A lot of people come in just to see that. And then the Artists Association as well, the Beaumont Artists Association usually fills in the other months. So we have an art gallery over there which brings in some traffic. Anyway, so the stats are all there. I hope you get a chance to look at this document a little closer, but we'll just skip down. So this was the budget, which you probably see in a different form through team budget, but this is just the one I prepped for this document. So the big issues, obviously, in this 2019 budget is I'm trying to close the gap that exists in the two areas of staffing levels and space. So according to the standards in the province, we should be operating, or it should be the middle. There's the basic, middle, and exceptional. But at the middle level, you're supposed to have 0.7 per thousand full-time equivalencies, right? So it should be about 13 FTEs for us, but we run it at about 9. So we've been running at 9 FTEs, which obviously we do really well at, and we're very successul. But a lot of that is because a lot of my staff have a portfolio which really doubles up, and they do a lot of stuff that they have to do sort of at the desk as they help. It would be like if your front, if the receptionist at the front also had a budget portfolio, or some other portfolio in the community that they had to actually almost another full-time thing, right? So there's quite a few staff that I have that are operating on 2 different levels. They're the front desk staff that help with the public like all day that they're there, but they also have other things that they have to do, whether it's collection development or fines management or something like that. So we operate at 9 FTEs, but we need to get up to closer to 13 sooner rather than later. So in this budget, I have added another part-time person. It sort of bumps the part-time wage. It's a 15.2% increase there. It bumps that wage to get another part-time person in there. That's 20 hours per week at the entry-level wage. So that's one of the bigger concerns. And if that pattern continues, which is what my hope would be, is that we'll probably get up to about 12-ish FTEs by the end of the 5-year plan, right? So we're just slowly trying to close that gap in the FTEs. And of course, the other big thing is you'll see the 2,222% increase in the consulting fees, which is essentially just putting back in that $20,000 that we had for the feasibility study 2 years ago. We put it in, we ran the feasibility study, as you all know, with Manisk Isaac, and we concluded that the best option obviously was to expand on that building right there to a cost of about $18 million. And so last year we put in the $20,000 to continue that process, to look into the second level of design and what that would entail. And it didn't go, but anyway, it's back in there now. So that's just what that increase means. The idea here is that we need to keep the momentum going. It is an inevitability, right? I mean, if you look at any major city, town, anything, Calgary, Public, Edmonton with the Milner Library, Halifax, you name the big city, the library has become what a cathedral would have been in the Middle Ages or any other time in history, where there's something that grounds that community, a sort of the plaza, the center, right, where people go, and where the city planners say what is going to be the focal point. And quite often it was those centers of culture and necessarily religion in a certain area, like a cathedral. If you go to Europe, all the piazzas are surrounding these things. But in our day and age, it is typically a library. Seattle Public Library, Calgary Public Library, you name the big city, they're spending millions of dollars on a showpiece building, which is a library, which is a sort of a community center for the mind, for the culture, for the community. So I do think it's an inevitability here in Beaumont if we want to make Beaumont the greatest. And I'm not trying to be too superlative there, but basically, if you really want to say this is a great community, and I think I don't have the metrics here, but I know it's something that I can certainly retrieve for you. But the idea that what happens to a community when you build a library? What happens around it? The increase in real estate real estate values, just the footpath traffic around these kinds of things, like just the benefits of building a quality library in a community. That research is for me to do, obviously for your benefit, and I will do it. I can tell you right now what the result will be. It'll show that that is the trend. That is what's happening now. That when cities commit to building, an award-winning top-tier library, it just pays dividends to the whole community. So those are the things that really are happening here in the budget as far as the increases go. Bottom line for the town, it's a 6.6% increase in the unconditional operating grant, which is provided to the library, which we work with. Other than that, there's nothing too out of the ordinary. Alan and I talked about splitting out the book budget, so it'll look like the book. If you read the books line only, it says it dropped by 61%, but that's actually not true. What happened was that Yellowhead Regional Library allots about $15,000, so it's 75 cents per capita. We pay them for the membership, about $75,000, but then they split off a per capita amount for purchases, which we purchased through a database of theirs for books and stuff. So that just got split out. So there's a new line which wasn't there last year called the YRL allotment, which accounts for that. So the book budget isn't down from 13,000 down to 5. It's actually probably up a little bit, closer to 20,000, where it used to be around 17. So a combination of what YRL provides and a combination of what I use separately from YRL for other things like CDs, DVDs, and stuff. So anyway, apart from that, I don't think there's anything else that I have to say. So that's pretty much a sort of a summary of the sort of the mindset of the library in regards to the budget.
No, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming in today. I don't think anybody on council doubts the importance of a library in our community, but I'll open it up to questions from members of council. Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious, you mentioned the program where someone can borrow a book from the Calgary Library and drop it off here in Beaumont. How does that program work provincially to get those articles back to the original library? Is there a cost that's passed on to our library to be part of that program? Or is that program covered by the government? There's no cost to our library if people were dumping their stuff from other places?
Yeah, no.
Just curious.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So there's lots of different ways that these things can happen. The initiative I was referring to is called Me Libraries, where you use your card and you can do it online, and all you're doing is saying, so I'm a Beaumont patron. So I go online and I say I'm going to be in Calgary and I'm going to be in Lethbridge, and I add them to my list of libraries I'm going to use on this database. And then when I go to those libraries, I just hand them my card, and that staff person will never have seen me before. They won't have anything to do with it. But when they scan the barcode, boom, I pop up as a legitimate patron, right? So that's how I borrow. But returning is usually through interlibrary loan. So we don't pay anything for it. There's no government courier or anything. Some of the smaller libraries that are more rural, they probably would have to. But all of our stuff is going back to YRL. So what we pay to YRL is covering sort of the interlibrary loan in general, and it includes that. So it goes back to YRL, all our stuff, even if I order something from Leduc, right? It goes back to YRL and then back to Beaumont. So all the member libraries, it funnels through the headquarters in Spruce Grove. And so then that's how Me Libraries was able to sort of launch itself, using that infrastructure already that existed for interlibrary loan.
Yes,
Yeah.
short answer is no.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sure, that's no.
Yeah.
Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not sure if this is more of a question for administration. There's a $20,000 request for consulting fees to look at further library expansion. We are conducting, I think we discussed yesterday, a review of town buildings as well. Is there any scope for consolidating, integrating those two activities, or do they have to occur separately and be funded separately?
I'll turn back to administration, but we also did talk about having a look at this, where the library fits in when we're doing our recreational master plan, and that hasn't come back yet either. So, but
excuse me. Wait a minute, gotta get my throat here. We can certainly look at that. There has been no discussion between the two groups regarding amalgamating that process, but it'd be certainly worth exploring and see if there's some synergies.
Yes, I'm just thinking that then do we still budget that amount then and hope that we maybe can save some money by combining the two studies?
well, we'll talk about budget after we're done this presentation. I don't want to get into that now. Let's talk about it. They're here in front of us. Let's ask them questions about the library.
Okay, thank
I
you.
guess I would just say that, we're open to whatever helps move this forward. So whether that's an combination of our efforts or whether it's separate, we're open to whichever.
Thank you.
Councillor McGowan-Swain.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and thank you for coming in so early on a Saturday. Speaking of early, you used the word inevitable. There we go. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get that out this early, but I agree. It is inevitable. Just got to slow down here. To Councillor Stout's comment, we had this in front of us last year, and we wanted to collect it as part of that larger feasibility study. The question I had for you, though, last year you're in front of us again and talked to us about upgrading our staffing levels to meet provincial standards, and you got unanimous support for that. So is this just a continuation on of that process? Is that something, and I apologise, I haven't seen the long-term plan, but I assume that you're building up towards that to get to that 12 FTE number. Could you just speak to, would it look like us be receiving these similar requests to bump up that FTE requirement going forward?
Yes, absolutely. The idea is that it actually would follow this pattern. Like in my mind, the 5-year, which I think went to Alan, does have this additional permanent part-time, same scenario, 20 hours. Over here, I'm not sure what the town does, but in the library we have permanent part-timers and full-timers and casuals. And the permanent part-timers, I typically bring them in at what the base has to be, which is the 20 hours, 40 hours per pay period kind of thing. So yeah, my intention is to do that year over year until I get close enough to 13. The problem is by the time we get to 13, we won't be at 20,000 people here. We're going to be at 26, 27. So there'll always be that. I mean, we're always going to have to outperform, right, our levels of staffing, which is fine. We're good at that. It's prudent, and it's what I need to do to keep moving us forward. So yes, yeah. I intend to do that.
No, I appreciate, and I'd say I would imagine that's pretty common across the board, trying to increase those staffing levels. Just as a note for administration, then, if we could include that Again, I don't think anyone's got any concerns about, making sure we raise our staffing levels to provincial standards, but if we could just put that into the budget document, just so that we can speak to that.
It was in the budget document when we looked at the 5-year plan. There was staffers.
Okay.
So we've had this discussion, unless you want to go backwards.
Okay. Thank you. Was that the point you were going to make, Mr. Harris? Yeah. So I could say inevitable, but I couldn't remember the 5-year plan. So short comment then is thank you for including it in the 5-year plan. It helps us plan and understand the request going forward.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for coming out so early in the morning, Mr. Walters and Mr. Spink. I just want to make it very clear, just underline the request, and having sat on the library board and been part of the discussions, I just want to make sure that I have it understood and that my colleagues do as well. So the 51,600 increase that we're requesting, I think that's the number from over last year, basically makes up one part-time staff and the $20,000 for the continuation of the consulting. Is that approximate?
Yeah, that's the bulk. I mean, there's obviously other
little pieces here and there, but essentially the bulk of the increase is made up of a staff person, increased staff person part-time, as well as $20,000.
Yeah, plus, and there'll be other smaller.
Yeah, small things here and there, granted, but, thinking in big terms, high level.
Yep.
Could you make the connection, please, for me and the rest of council, on how staffing relates to the increasing in programming? Because one of the things I think we all love about the library is that it provides lots of places for people to come and bump up against each other and build community and do all kinds of really neat things, welcoming newcomers, French language, etc. I wonder if you could just help us understand how an additional staff person can help with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just first off, I would, we do have about 2,000 volunteer hours. We do have, we have a lot of volunteers that help with programming, with service like that. Going back to the idea of the 5-year plan, in my mind, the hiring of this extra staff person isn't always for the same purpose. So I think this immediate one is actually going to be more to help spell off the staff that have a multiple portfolio, right? So I have one staff person who manages all fines and fees, but when they come into work, they actually spend the whole day helping patrons. If it's a really busy day and they don't get any off-desk time, then that other portfolio suffers, right? And then there's one person that does a similar thing with collection development and collection assessment and management, right? So there could be sometimes, for example, 2019, that this permanent part-timer is coming on to basically be a front desk person. So that the service that they're going to be providing is the traditional sort of cert desk service. I know that in a subsequent year that we have a casual who's been running our ESL and a lot of our children's programs, but does it as a casual. Stays below the 20 hours a week threshold. It came on maybe at 8 hours, now it's up to about 17 hours, and there's so much stuff that can be done that she could easily break that 20 threshold. But she's mentioned for family reasons that she's not ready to do that, commit to that till a certain point in her life. So I can see that as we go down the road, there'll be some years where that new person is specifically for programming or specifically for public service at the front desk kind of thing. So it'll change year over year. The program department was one person not very long ago, and one person on a casual, and now it's one full-timer and a person who's almost about 60 hours, so 75-80% full-time, and the casual. And then we get we used to have one summer student, now we get 2 summer students to run the summer program. So the program's been growing in its own staffing besides the regular operational staffing, right? So the program department, definitely it grows and grows. We now added, every year we're adding programs. We just added an outreach to shut-ins to seniors. That's going to take a certain load on who's going to do that, who's going to deliver that service. The staffing I have now to do go to the senior centers and deliver a program on site there, right? So these things are where the staffing, these new initiatives, and some places where we don't, where we contract in, so we offer French, we offer Spanish, and in the new year we're going to offer sign language as well. So we're very much an educational institution, and so we contract those teachers in as well. So that's not necessarily our staffing in particular, but the idea is that there's a lot of people involved in the services that we provide. So I just can't guarantee that every year it's going to go specifically to a program like Rhyme Time or Tickle Time. It won't necessarily always trickle down to that. Some years it has to go to the operational side of things, and then some years the person will be completely dedicated to the program department, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Could you just make the connection as well to programs are limited by the amount of space that the library has to offer? That's been one of the constraints, I think, as well in programming.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing the best we can. Like, I mean, the one thing I didn't mention in here, which I'm sure most of you might be familiar with, is that there's in the works a $20,000 capital corporate sponsorship. Corporate sponsorship with Dream Development. And this is our way. Ever since I've been here for a while now. And, as soon as I walked in the building, I said we need to do things to make this building more functional. And if you were here, you might have remembered there was a $40,000 retro, like a redo of the stacks of the layout of the library with I think 20 from Western Diversification Grant, and then 10 and 10 from the board and the Friends. And that was an initiative when I first came. So we're very small for what we do. We need to maximize every single corner of this building. And so this new initiative, which has been happening year over year, but this latest one is the same kind of thing. There's a demand because of our programs, because we have a program room, but at the same time we use the corner right here. And the demographic is changing so much that now I have people coming in asking for the traditional usage of a library. They want to come in and they want, it's no more like, oh, they're going to mock the person and go, shh. They actually want that to happen now. They want to come in and they want to study, right? As the demographic, as all those 4-year-olds that we used to have grow up, and now these guys are going to, university, but they want to study in Beaumont on the weekends. They want a place to study. And so one of the initiative is specifically to make those study rooms in the corner, because they'll come in and I'll get complaints. And these are the kind of complaints the librarian wants, right? I love the place, I want to be here, but it's so busy. The knitters are making so much noise on that Wednesday afternoon knitting club. And Megan's running a program over here because there's another program going in the other room and it's so loud. So that's a great problem to have. But that is the problem I'm trying to solve, right? And so this is why the space is an issue when it comes to programs, because we have to run concurrent programs, and we run all day. Like, I mean, we have drop-ins more often in the evenings than we ever did before. And I mean, there's the quiet time right after school, like the 4 to 6, where maybe the program room is empty, maybe. But there's a couple days where there's a choir now that rents it and they use it. So we're bursting at the seams when it comes to space and programs, whether it's our own, and you'll see the rental revenue, right? I mean, you would think, for all of you that understand the trends in Beaumont, that we could really make a revenue over there as a rental space, but there just isn't any time. Like, there's very little time, right, that we can actually offer it, right? But if there was someone who wanted to rent a space between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock, which isn't the high time for renting, we'd have a space for them. But as soon as 6 o'clock hits, everybody wants a meeting space. Everybody's looking for something, right? And we rent out as much as we can, but 2 nights a week we dedicate to our language instruction, right? And then Friday nights is not open for that kind of thing. So there's a lot of, a lot of space crunch, basically, is where we're at. So, yeah.
No, I appreciate that, and I totally understand the space crunch you're facing. You're not the only group in town looking for space in capital projects, so just be aware there's a lot of competing pressures for a lot of things. So, Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I realize that the majority of your costs, looking for your presentation here, is all labor and labor-related expenses, which I understand completely. But I am curious, your fees and dues in your presentation is $78,000, roughly 8% of your overall budget. So I'm surprised that it'd be that high. What kind of fees and dues does the library have to pay that seems to eat up a big chunk of your budget?
Yeah, so actually the almost all of that, I think all of that, is actually the fee to the membership in YRL.
Okay.
So that's I can't underestimate or overestimate. I can't just like YRL is handling so much of what, if we weren't part of YRL, we'd have to do. So interlibrary loan,
right,
cataloging, all that stuff we outsource. If I had to do that in house, it would be 5 salaries, right? Which would maybe at least, right? So IT. There's so much that YRL does. So we pay them, and as a result of paying them that service, we have that connection with the province. Okay. We have access to IT support. We have access to the system itself, the ILS, the library system, and of course client services, professional development, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's actually the fee to the membership of the LRA.
Good, that's good to know, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Hendricks?
Your Worship, and just with respect to the library, and of course, I did put my time in with the library board and was part of the build when it happened, and certainly went through all the same pressures, given where the library came from, because I was part of the 2 moves to get it to here. But what we found at that time was that the library board had to be in concert really with the town as far as math and money. The ask is, for the physical capital to physically build it. And I know Mrs. Manask was in and provided us with quite a report and provided us with some numbers that were pretty significant. And when you apply that against all the other asks in this town, then the pro forma package starts to get, what do you do? So I would suggest that if you're still dealing with the Manask Isaac group, that you say, like, we got to tone it down a little bit. She's over 300 and something a foot in terms of the construction costs. It's pretty significant. I realize that we're trying to create a property that is significant, but to what level? Because if you start pricing yourself out of the pro forma package, then we've got all these other asks. Well, this we can't afford. Same space, but we can't afford. If the number was different, maybe we can afford same space. So I think we really got to look at what it is that we got in terms of dollars, so that we're not pricing ourselves out of the conversation in the room here, because it was significant. Okay. Thanks.
Fair enough. If there are no further questions, thank you very much for coming in early this morning. We really do appreciate it. And
Thank you.
yeah, no, the library is a significant asset to our community, and we appreciate all the work you do.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so going back up to, we'll hit their operating budget. Going back to page 37 of 81. Okay, so we just had the presentation from the library group. It was great. They do have one ask in there for consulting fees of $20,000 to complete phase 2. And they're asking for a staffer. I'm okay with the staffer. I'd like to have a conversation around the 20 grand in their phase 2, because I remember back when we back last year when they had the same ask, we wanted them to go through the process with a regional master plan, recreational and cultural master plan, not regional master plan, and see where the library fit in the overall scheme of things and the culture budget. And because, yeah, you guys have seen the list. They want a library, we want a theater, we have a fire hall expansion coming, we need public works expansion, we got to do work on the town hall office. It's all got to fit somewhere, and I hesitate to give them 20 grand to continue down the path if the path doesn't mesh with the overall plan. So my opposition to it, the 20 grand, still stands until we finish these plans. Councillor Monkhouse-Swain.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I've woken up, so it should be okay now. It was a long baseball game. So I agree, and the reason why I didn't vote for the 20,000. Sorry, maybe I'll just start off. The clerk, absolutely fine, makes sense for me. The $20,000, I voted against it last year because I wanted it to be part of the recreational master plan. My understanding is that that's coming back midway through this year.
Midway through 2019.
Yep. So I haven't quite woken up. So you know what I mean. Midway through next year, and so I think that the study is important to do. It's important for them to finish off that piece. I wonder if we could figure out the timing on it, and maybe it's a case of once that recreational master plan comes back and looks at where the library fits within that project, then they go out and use that to piggyback on. So personally, I don't actually have a problem with it within the budget as long as it's tied to the master plan. But I'm just seeking your advice in terms of timing on that. So you think we're going to get that back in the middle of 2019? But is that process going to take a while? And are we still maybe 1 year too soon on that to try and add that on. And the thinking is, if you're bringing it back in June, relatively complete, will they be able to then take that, go back to Mackaysack and say, yeah, we're going to go through that study, but we want you to use this plan as the reference base? Is that realistic for next year, or is your advice to hold off another year until we've got that plan fully marked up?
Your worship, members of council, it's a chicken and egg conversation. They've started their process prior to the master plan. The master plan is basically a framework document that will look at recreation, parks, facilities, etc. in the future for a 10-year period of time. It's also going to look at, placement of these amenities in the community and the need for some of these amenities, etc. There's no question that the town needs a library. Mm-hmm. The master plan will be coming back in midsummer of 2019. That's the schedule right now. They're seeming to be able to keep on our trajectory of meeting their timelines. Councillor Hendricks made a very good point regarding the cost and that framework discussion, and that's a conversation council should really be having as well, of what kind of parameters you'd set around that. But I guess the question is from the master plan to the feasibility study, are we talking about a expansion of the existing library? Are you talking about, some communities, they have library spaces around the community, use of, the joint facilities, etc. And some of those conversations have to be had, and some of them will be had with the master plan, but some of them will have to be had outside of that as well. So it's all kind of part and parcel. I don't doubt that money would be used, the $20,000. It's how it will be applied, so those parameters.
Yeah, and thank you. And to follow up, I think the only way we're going to be able to fund some of these projects is if we combine them, whether it's an arts facility with the library type thing. So that's why I wanted to wait for the recreational master plan to come back for that. So I'm on the fence here on the 20,000, and I know Councillor Barnhart's going to jump in here, but for me, you talk about the chicken and the egg. I think putting that out there before we get that report back is putting the cart before the horse. And so I think from my perspective, we get the recreation master plan. If that time that comes back and we see the value, then we can just bring that back, and you can just have a conversation with us, and we put it as an item in front of council, and we could potentially look at adding the 20,000 there.
Yeah. As well, I want to see where council does have to do some prioritizing once those plans come back as to which facilities go first. And same argument as last budget, spending $20,000 to finish a feasibility study for a building that, if we rank it first, it's going to be good, money well spent. If it comes in seventh and it's not going to happen for 10 years, it's money poorly spent. So I think it's still early, but Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thank you, Worship. A few thoughts. I think there's been a lot of important comments stated. One of them was there's no question the town needs a library. Couldn't agree more. On the staffing levels, fully support that. The recreational master plan, and a look at where the library fits in that. I think that's a very important piece moving forward. Personally, I'm not convinced that an $18 million spend in our community in this location is the right spend. I think that an $18 million spend probably in a different location would be a better thing. The point made by the presenter this morning is that a library is a hub, and it's a gathering place, and things happen around a library. If we were to plug $18 million into this spot right here, I don't know where we'd hub anything, because there's no physical room in this spot. The ask for the 20,000 is actually to complete phase 2 of a study, which means we've completed phase 1 already, and phase 1 has led us down a path to a point, and phase 2 would expand on that path to that point. So personally, I'm not of the belief that this would be the location to spend that money, and therefore I wouldn't support going any further down the path towards phase 2, because phase 2 would expand on phase 1, which talks about this location. So it's pretty rational for me. I support the look. I support the library. My family's there every week. We go to programming. 100% on all that. I just don't think here is the spot where we're going to do that in the community after we get through the recreational master plan. So, thank you.
Councillor Hendricks.
Worship, for me, it's the spatial planning with our assets. We have assets within the community that are overutilized and others that are underutilized. And I'm hoping that we're going to get a report back that says, okay, given all our parts, bits, and pieces, this is the ultimate situation that we have, and this is how we can move parts, bits, and pieces around. If that doesn't solve it, then we got to go to the next layer, which would be, okay, standoffs, one-offs, build our own new library potentially, where, all those sort of things. But I think the first thing is to just check our asset piece and see what we've got and see how we can utilize what we have. Yes, we've heard from the library, we've heard from this town office. I mean, everybody's shoehorned in here. We've got the fire department issues. We've got, we have the CCBCC that's quite frankly underutilized, and 40,000 square feet. So there's all these parts, bits, and pieces that I think need to be reviewed first. If there's no way to fix it through that review, then we go to the next layer. And the library has already had, I thought, a pretty comprehensive review. The Manask documents were extremely comprehensive. I don't know how much more of a layer you need out of that. I get it. I've seen it. I've read it. See what the thoughts are. I don't think we need to start scrolling down into size of toilets and and the layouts of the washrooms. I think it's more that higher concept. Got it. This space, got it. CCBCC, got it. What we're doing at Aquafit, got it. BRAC, we have staff now in the Ken Nichols Center, where we're putting them in as part of our Parks and Recs or whatever. Okay, how's that supposed to work? And then that's taking space away from user groups. Okay, got it. How do we fix all this? And I think we need to get that done first, and then we start layering down as to how we're going to spend our way out of the problem. Thanks.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am not in any way going to push that council spend the $20,000 at this point in time, but I want to explain a little bit. The previous study with Mannix Isaac was a feasibility study. It was not meant to say this is the building, it has to be this way, and it was done with the town. It wasn't done in isolation with the town. The town was well aware and was involved in the process, and the library board did collaborate with the town on trying to find what was feasible at this time and place. And so a number of locations were looked at. New lands weren't even annexed yet, so it was certainly difficult to look any bigger than what was available in terms of space and the ability. Feasibility-wise, for the dollars available, we all knew that was going to take another layer of work. One of the I think primary motives for continuing to put this in the budget and make a request to keep the momentum going was that the volunteers are willing to keep at this and to work at it and to provide the rationale and do what we can to make sure the library meets all the needs in the community that it can meet. So there's a continuing desire and need to keep at this and not let it go. And I know these projects take a lot longer than 2, 3, 4 years, sometimes 10, 15 years before a project of this scope can actually see the light of day. So I was hoping myself that the $20,000 would be more of a contribution towards a collaborative effort and something that the Arts Society and others could get behind. And I don't know if the town thinks that the existing request for $125,000 for the town office can cover the cost of bringing those groups together and coming up with a plan after the rec facilities master plan is completed. That's fine, but I think this $20,000 could be a contribution from the library towards that collaborative effort. So I as well think it has to be done as a larger project with all of the other groups that are looking for facility space. But I do applaud the library for continuing to put in front of us why this is necessary and basing it on provincial standards for programming, staffing, etc. So it's not something that is frivolous. It's certainly something I believe needs to happen. It's a matter of how and when. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go Councillor Stout, Councillor Van Newkirk, and then end debate on this subject because it really is only a $20,000 spend.
Thank you, Worship. Excuse me, too early in the morning for me too. I might be labouring under a misapprehension here, so correct me if I'm wrong. I thought the Library Act gave the power to set budgets to the library board, and that we can agree or disagree with them how big the budget's going to be, but what they actually spend it on is entirely within their own scope. So we can dock them 20,000 if we don't want them to spend it on this, but
they choose, and
but they could go ahead anyway if they
but
choose.
if they choose to rejig their budget and squeeze it elsewhere, I don't think we can stop them. Can we?
Through your worship, the town has ultimate authority on the budget for the library, to the amount you contribute to the library, how they spend it within their thing, they can spend it. So the town can give, as mentioned yesterday, $1 or give the full amount that is there for the library to run the library. That is the town's ultimate control of the spending of the library, no different than the control for the spending for the town in the direction you give the CAO.
Thank you. That was my understanding too, effectively. So we can recommend that they don't do it, but if they want to rejig their budget, then it's entirely up to them. This is a $20,000 amount in a $1 million budget. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Give or take.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's.
Well, it's up to them. Councillor Van Newkirk, final comment, and we're going to vote on this 20 grand.
You bet. Just piggybacking on Councillor Hendricks's comments about the asset pounding in the community and the bigger look at that, is that idea encompassed in a current activity that is underway, or do we need to find a way to put that ask forward and combine it with something else we're doing? Question for the mayor, Mr. Harris, or administration.
Let's deal with the 20 grand and then we'll deal with that.
Sure.
Because it's actually a separate conversation.
Okay, and is it specific to this piece, or?
Well, we'll do it right after we do this vote. I just don't want to muddy the waters.
Sure, fair.
Okay, so all in favor of providing the $20,000 for the feasibility study? Well, their budget will get approved when we approve it in December. We haven't approved anybody else's budget.
This one isn't different, this is a lot. We approve the amount. That's my understanding.
Yes, once we take this 20 grand out by tacit approval, we've approved it.
20,000 is what your motion is?
My motion is to not provide as part of their budget the $20,000 to complete phase 2.
Request is your motion.
Yes. Yeah.
We just deduct 20,000 from the request, but that's all we really do.
Yes, I'm deducting 20 grand from their request. That's my motion. So, well, yeah, it sort of got muddied. We'll do this again. It sort of got muddied. Relax. We'll vote again. We'll clarify the question.
So,
Yeah, my motion is to remove the 20 grand from the budget. That's the motion. So if you answer yes, 20's out. If you answer no, 20, you want 20 in, and they can spend it how they want.
through your worship, the motion should be to reduce the contribution to the library by $20,000.
There you go. That's what I was trying to say. God. All right, so all in favor of reducing the library budget ask by $20,000? That carries 5-2. So the $20,000 ask is $20,000 is removed from the budget. Running it down. Yeah, Danilek, yes. Stout, Barnhart, no. Yes, the rest of the way. Yeah, normally it flashes up, but. All right, so getting back to Councillor Van Newkirk and Councillor Hendricks's question, is there some type of spatial analysis going on with the town, or? Mr. Ellis?
Thank you, Worship. As it was shown probably in the earlier budget under the CAOs or my budget, there's $125,000 in the budget to do a spatial analysis of all town facilities. That was to basically look at where we're putting staff.
Yeah, that's what we're asking, right? Or am I wrong? That's what I'm asking. Councillor Hendricks.
So the discussion popped up at the quarterly.
Yeah.
And we had our whiteboard, and so the idea was, and staff for sure would be part of that, but the idea was to ensure that we're utilizing the spaces as best as possible. So, I mean, to be extreme, maybe, or not, what happens if we move, the town office into the CCBCC? You know what I'm saying? And what happens if the library comes in here? What happens if the cultural center turns into that facility? That sort of dynamic in terms of discussion and review, just so that we can say, hey, we've sourced it all out, we've looked at what our assets are, we've done everything we can do with what we have, there's nothing further, so our only other step is to start spending our way out of this. And how is that to work, right? So.
Is that what we're doing? Yeah. Essentially what we're doing? Mr. Hiltz?
Yes, Your Worship. It would look at basically where we will be, our space becomes an issue, where we'll have to start looking at creative solutions and things like that, from building new facilities, bringing in portables, taking over other facilities. That's really all part and parcel of that package.
Councillor Barnhart.
Maybe the same question Councillor Stout has. Thank you.
Okay, so, if you have the same question, only one of you needs to ask.
Well, are you saying the library needs are going to be part of that spatial analysis? Because I really want to make sure that that does get looked at.
Mr. Hiltz.
Thank you, Your Worship. We can include the library, but it will just basically look at it from that same perspective, like in terms of that staffing to utilization of space, as we're going to be doing in all the other facilities. If we go really far into this, like, in terms of, I guess what I'm going to say, like future feasibility of the facilities, et cetera, we may not have the funding to do this. We'll take this as far as we can with $125,000, and then we may have to come back for maybe a phase 2 if that doesn't satisfy where we're going.
Fair enough. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Worship. Then, yes, exactly that. That's what we've just voted to take 20,000 out of the library budget to not do, but now apparently we might not be able to afford it in the other budget.
No, from a very high level, it's affordable, but from, like, if you're looking to do something specifically, and then once again, we're chicken and the egg. Like, do we do this high level and then look at the library? And I think we need to stay high level and stick with the study and see what our facilities look like and where we can move them and how we have to spend our way out of it if necessary. I think, because the way I looked at the second phase of Manzig Isaac, they were going to come out with how to expand that building. And I'm not in favor of spending that 20 grand on that yet until we get the master plan done, this look done, the rest of it done. And honestly, I'll be honest, I'm kind of perplexed how you guys are still sitting on this and what your intentions are.
Can I respond?
Yeah, sure. It's like...
well, my intentions are that the library expansion be included with all the other expansion plans that we've got, and if we're not going to allow them to make their own expansion plans by giving them the budget to do that they've asked for, then yeah, I need absolutely to be assured that any further expansion or reutilization of existing space facilities absolutely includes the library, because we've just discussed how, and I'll use that word, inevitable it's going to be.
It's inevitable with a finite pot of money. But we just heard Mr. Hilt say he would include it in the high level, and then we can look at future phases. I think we need to stay high level and get that done first before we look at the specifics, which is what I think the 20 grand was for. And so we need to get that high level done.
So this is a question of
timing.
Well, of the general versus the specific.
Yes.
Okay, I can live with that, but I have to understand that the library, I'm going to paraphrase Mr. Hiltz just a little bit here, and what he just said was it can include the library, not that it would include the library.
Semantics. Can we include the library? Mr. Schwartz?
I think the issue is the level of detail. Councillor Hendricks threw out what I was envisioning that 125 was going to look at, was overall, we look at all of our facilities and all of our needs, where can they fit? Where does it generally look like they can fit for square footage and basic structure, location, and geographical location in our town? The next step will then be, let's look at these specific buildings, and if they need to be reconfigured, they need to be changed, they need to be expanded on, renovated, I'm not sure. I don't see us getting to that level of detail in a $125,000 study.
Yeah, I'm sitting at the high level with Councillor Hendricks and yourself. Councillor Mungo-Swain. Councillor Van Newkirk, we're going to, three more comments and then we're going to move on.
I'll just expand on that a little bit more. I've been sitting on a comment here. So administration's put a lot of work into this budget. They've put a lot of work into understanding internally what their staffing needs are. Initial space planning last year was approved. We know that as the service needs of town go up, we have to focus on administration being able to up their game. This 125 is a part of that moving forward, and I really think we shouldn't be muddying the waters with the library piece in their study. I think we should let them do what they intended to do with that money, as explained by CAO Schwartz right now. I don't hear anyone on council saying that they're not committed and that we aren't committed to the library piece moving forward. So I propose letting administration do what they were going to do with the 125 and move on here.
Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a point of clarification, if you don't mind, for my own benefit possibly. On page 18 of 81, the CAO's budget documentation, I see at the end of the expense line, increase in consulting fees relating to the town office review redesign, amount of $125,000.
That's the 125 grand we're currently discussing.
That's the same we're talking about, it's the 125 grand we're talking about,
Yes.
correct? Okay, I guess I'm just asking, the point is that if I'm a citizen of Beaumont reading that line, that tells me that we're spending $125,000 to redesign and review the town office, not all of our assets that we're talking about, which I believe is the intent, and I think it's great we're going to do that. I'm just asking the question because to me it's quite specific to the town office.
Okay.
It's not the intent, I know, but
we'll fix it worded in the budget.
okay,
No
that tells the people what we're doing that is a much better. Sorry, I'm not being critical.
No
I think-
worries. Councillor Barnard, final comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I won't belabor this. I just wanted to clarify what I thought I heard you say, Mr. Mayor, that the $20,000 or one of the councillors was Phase 2 study with whatever the terms of reference were with Manic Isaac. That is not the case. There was never any contract made or decision made to go again with the $20,000 to that particular consultant. The idea that was raised at the board table that I recall, and Councillor Stout can correct me if I'm wrong, was to continue to work towards the library expansion. And one of the thoughts, in fact, a task force was struck to work collaboratively with the Art Society and others in the community that wanted to continue down this path. So when I see that $20,000 wouldn't even come close to what was next in line if we were to go with the same consultant and follow on the same path. So I think the library is trying to be persuasive for sure and moving in the direction of continuing to raise council's awareness that there is a need for this expansion. And the $20,000 was a way to continue that collaboration and work together in the community. I just wanted to clarify that because I think there was a misconception about what the $20,000 was for.
Fair enough. Okay, so are we done with library? Sounds like it. All right. Moving forward, I lost my sheet. We'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back, do the quick in camera, and then we'll move on with the capital budget. Do that again. Okay, so there are two matters arising from the in-camera session. The first motion to be made is to move the mayor's salary to a full-time position. Put a placeholder in the budget of $130,000, sorry, I couldn't remember the number. $130,000, admin to prepare a report and bring to council on the comparator municipalities. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none. All in favor? Sorry, all in favor? Sorry, Sam, I hit a button. Carries unanimously. Second motion, arising from the in-camera session, is to increase the compensation paid to councillors to be commensurate with the region with a placeholder of $99,000 to accommodate that. Same thing, administration to come back with a report with the comparative municipalities. All in favor? Sorry, discussion on the motion?
Just to clarify, Mayor, the 99,000 is for all 6 of the councillors, correct?
Yeah, it's the budget adjustment to bring everybody to the additional amount.
Correct. Thank you.
All in favor? Councillor Daniluk?
Oh, sorry.
It's not going to show till I hit stop vote. So that carries 6-1. And just on the issue of transparency, that new rate is 49.5, all taxable. No per diems. All right, is there any further discussion on this? And then we'll just take a 5-minute break, reset, and then start on the capital plan. Okay, 5. Take 5. Call the meeting back to order. 2019 capital budget, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Your Worship. So before you is just a quick snapshot of the 2019 budget requests. As you'll note that the majority of them are through reserves, with the exception of the Highway 625 50th Street intersection, which is paid through money that we already have for 50th Street improvements, and then the neighborhood renewal program, which is coming out of the BMTG portion of the MSI grant, and the BMT portion of the MSI grant relates to road infrastructure. And basically it's the basic municipal transportation grant. So we'll start with the first capital request is a HRIS system. It's sorry?
I don't think we need to go through them one by one.
Okay.
Council's read it.
Okay.
I do want to just ensure that I've carried just as clear on the second bill phase 2 storm upgrades. If you're good with that, be happy to step up.
Yeah, if we get into that specific item, rather than the 30,000 foot view, I won't be upset if you stand up and walk. Okay, so I think council's had a chance to read the book and go through them. Probably the easiest way to go through this is just pick and choose ones you have questions on. Otherwise, I'm going to assume we don't need to debate the rest. Okay? So questions on the current ones, and then I know there was a couple of outside, there's one project that we wanted an update on, but we'll ask that when we're done with what's in the book. Fair? Yep. All right, so questions on specific projects within the book. Councillor Van Newkirk.
So the process proposed is that the ones that we agree with, we don't chat about. The ones that we have questions on, we bring up then.
That's what, yeah. Just bring up the ones your questions with, and if you're happy with them, we don't need to go through them.
Okay.
The little dialogue on each project is pretty self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll start with the, just flipping through my notes here. Sorry. I want to chat about the grader at $435,000. page 41 of, page 41 of 81 on the hard copy.
Second one from the bottom.
Yeah, I'd like to talk, I'd like to open a discussion around the timing of that, and I'd like to throw an idea out there. I think we all know we have a running total going here for what's going to come, and I think it would be prudent to talk about some of what we don't do. And I think there's an opportunity with the grader to not buy a new grader and to explore a service schedule with perhaps Leduc County. I'm assuming that we need the grader to increase our service levels, yes, but also specifically to the annex lands and take over the roads in our periphery, and we probably experience some growing pains with that, and hence the ask. If that's not the case, I'd like to hear that from administration. But I would propose that we not spend the $435,000 on that until we explore what a service agreement and cost of a service agreement for what we need outside of or in the newly annexed lands with Leduc might look like. Open to anyone else's thoughts on that.
Comments from admin first? Ms. Lewin.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to members of council. As indicated in your budget information, this grader would be in addition to our fleet of our existing 2 graders, strictly for snow removal. We've increased our roadways by about 26 kilometers over since the last purchase in 2011 of our graders. And so in the summertime, when we maintain our gravel roads, we have the sufficient equipment to do that because we have 2 graders. But in the wintertime, through the snow, to maintain our service levels or to increase them, then that's something that we're having to add to our fleet.
Thank you. Councilor Barnhart, thoughts?
Not on that one.
Not on that one? Okay.
You want to finish that one?
No, we'll finish this one first and then we'll move on. Councilor Hendricks?
We had other ones, so.
Well, let's finish this one first.
For sure, yeah, I was still right there. I wasn't sure if you were going to let someone else get on that. A little bit more information, I guess, from administration, if I would. Of the 26 kilometers increase, are we looking at what percentage of that is due to the annex lands and would have been the piece that Leduc County would have looked after before the annexation? 2/3, 1/3?
Calculate it.
Yeah.
Mr. Schwartz?
Got Ms. Lewin here calculating that as best she can. While she's doing that, I'll remind council that this is part in a reaction to the increased service levels that were approved last year in the last year's budget. And if you recall, there was interest of getting into residential areas twice per year and clearing snow out of those areas quicker. So this is partially in response to do that. That's, as Ms. Lewin had suggested, our service levels have increased, as has the kilometers of our roadways. So those are both in part.
Did I buy you enough time, Ms. Lewin?
Yeah, my own 2 cents on it is I'm not above buying a new grader. If we're only going to use it in the winter, I think we should find some way to rent it out to the county for their summer program maybe and get some revenue, but that's something that you can talk about through inter-regional cooperation stuff, not necessarily today. Councillor Danlock, you had some thoughts?
Thank you, Worship. I guess similar to Councillor Manuker's question about the grader, just the vehicles themselves, I know we've been down this path before possibly, but a quick refresher, please. I'm sure we've gone through the idea of leasing versus brand new.
We're still on the grader.
Yes, but the grader could be purchased or could it be
sorry.
leased? But if the grader could be leased, could the pickup trucks be leased also? Just
Okay, now I
just a
understand your
general
Sorry, I
question,
should-
right?
my
So,
fault.
so I guess the question is, I'm sure we have explored this as administration and Mr. Harris specifically being our chief financial person, but is it beneficial for us to simply purchase these various vehicles and graders, or is it more beneficial to lease them and not have the depreciation on our shoulders? I'm not an accountant, obviously, but I lease vehicles and sometimes I buy them. Depends on the circumstance. These are big ticket items.
Going to the CAO?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Harris, just talking with Ms. Lewin here, on each of our purchases, we compare lease to buy, and at this point, the recommendation is to buy, because it's more cost effective. I don't know how that affects depreciation. Mr. Harris, if you want to add anything.
Through your worship, that is correct. Each, for every unit we look at, as when you make a decision as to whether to lease or to buy, we look at the options that are available. We have bought some stuff at auction, so we look at each individual piece of equipment and determine what's the best way to move forward.
Councillor Magoswayne?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. With all due respect, I don't think Councillor Van Nieuwkerk's question was answered. Have we explored a service level agreement with the county to service our roads? Take this grader out for conversation for now, but have we explored that option?
Ms. Lewin?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Councillor Monkoff-Swain, that has, when we first annexed all of these roads, we did go through that with Leduc County, and at that time, it was not cost effective for us to do that. Running it internally, our service levels are actually better than what Leduc County was offering for any of our annexed roads. And to answer your question, Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, we've added about 15 kilometers of new roads since the annexation.
Internally or external of the houses?
In the annexed area, not anywhere in our old footprint. That obviously we've built brand new subdivisions and obviously the roads have increased.
60%. Yeah, and I remember these conversations, this was even before my time up here, but sitting out here listening to concerns about, grader going by and not doing the driveways and all that sort of stuff, right? So I certainly appreciate our service levels are better, if I can say that. So I think good discussion, but ultimately what we're saying is that if we don't purchase the grader, administration cannot get the service levels down that council is requesting. Is that a fair?
That's fair, yes.
Councillor Van Nieuwkerk?
Is it correct to assume then that if we had this grader and we chose to increase service levels and get into the cul-de-sacs, that we wouldn't be hiring out any more equipment from anywhere else in order to facilitate that?
With the increased service levels with the cul-de-sacs, and I'll have to check what page that's on with the service level, but with the increase to the service levels for cul-de-sacs, this grader will be able to accommodate that as well.
So we wouldn't be leasing equipment?
So no other equipment in that, to increase to that service level, we have everything else we need to do that, and there would be no other hired equipment to do that?
The only hired equipment we have currently is trucks to haul the snow away. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hendricks.
And to piggyback on that, the discussion a few years ago was regarding equipment operators who currently live in Beaumont that could facilitate an ask for bringing graders into Beaumont on a as-needed basis to supplement the current configuration we have. I know Edmonton's got that same arrangement, right? When they get hit with a very, very heavy snow, all the private guys also get rolled into the discussion and off they go. So I know that at one point I directed 2 companies just to send in their hourly sheets and try to get some kind of an agreement set up with the town so that should you need that extra help, that those people would be available. So is that still in play at all? Is there an opportunity for those equipment operators to get some work out of the town? Should there be a supplemental requirement?
So we have multiple companies that we've contacted with their hourlies and seeing, we don't have formalized agreements with those companies at this time, but we have had conversations before, is if we get hit with a 30 centimeter snowfall and can you come in and help? And they have been, here's our hourlies, we're willing to help when you call us in. We just don't have formal agreements with them.
Okay, so you would call if you need the help. And just to piggyback on that then too, back to and the service levels and certainly the sheets that we currently have in place and the ask to have the grader at least twice a year past your home. I think that's more or less the ask from last year.
Yes, that was the ask from last year.
Yeah, that's right.
I expect the same for this year.
Yeah, so, and I'm hoping that there's no trigger tied to the service level documents, because there's, in there, we still have the 6-inch compacted, or even 8-inch compacted crown before they'll
talk about
physically go into those areas. And we know that the crown of the road is probably going to be the least impacted in terms of snow. It'll be, it's the windrows on either side. So I'm hoping that somehow we can get past the...
the service levels are coming up. We'll have another
Right,
chat
so
about
but if we're bringing this in, and this is also going to need a roof over it, it's going to need a mechanic on it, it's going to need an operator in it, that it's just not getting waxed. It's shiny, it's moving, it's grading. And I just want to make sure that the service level piece doesn't get in the way of that, so, yeah.
Councilor Van Newkirk.
Two questions. First question, when we say greater 435,000, do we look at that greater at 435,000 the same way we look at staff? So when we present a staff wage, if it's 100,000, we're presenting a burdened up staff. Does this grade, in the same vein Councillor Hendricks was just going down, when we say 435,000, is that a burdened up vehicle that includes X percentage of maintenance per year and operating costs per year, or is this the physical cost of the unit only?
Through your worship, it's the physical cost of the unit only.
But like all the components?
Yeah,
To put it
all in, delivered to the front door, no additional components. But it doesn't include, there's a maintenance period that it covers, or a warranty period.
Yeah.
That's all that it covers.
But it includes deckling and...
Yes.
And if there's, I hate to say it because vehicles aren't usually that way, but disposable, like consumables. Like if there's like, I don't know, plow. We need to put edge of the plow after every so often.
That includes it so that it can...
Yeah, do we have Wi-Fi? No, just kidding.
Just a follow-up.
I'm sure that you could have Wi-Fi, but I don't believe it's included.
No, we don't need Wi-Fi.
Just to follow up in a conclusion here. So my hang up. So I agree on the service levels, and I will support service level increases when we get deeper into that. My hang up here is purely a $435,000 spend that we only use part of the year. That's my hang up. I would, if what I'm hearing from administration is that we have done an evaluation on what it would cost to have a service level agreement to have the county, or explore an option with the county to grade the exterior roads, and if and our interior and our other two graders couldn't take care of that themselves, and we needed a third to do that, I get that, and I will just have to I'll have to trust that conversation happen, but I really want to make sure that mathematics has happened. The fiscally responsible thing to do is, with anything we have, is to use it as much as we can. And if we buy something to use it 12 weeks of the year and then park it the rest of the year, I think we might have missed a mark there. So.
Okay, so are we done with the question on the grader? We're happy with it?
I'll be voting for it, yeah.
Okay, then we don't need to go forth. Councillor Barnhart, moving on from the grader.
So we're moving on to a different page. And the next page, Area 1 Colonial Estates, the Neighborhood Renewal Program. I know for a number of years there's been some sidewalks around the Purple Slide Park that haven't been dealt with, and I'm wondering if this is included in this part of the budget.
You might as well leave your mic on.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Barnhart. This does not include that one segment of Reichert Drive, but any sidewalks that we notice that we have standards that we have to follow. So, vertical cracks, horizontal, and those kinds of things, trip hazards, we will obviously go and do the repairs on those. But this piece is strictly for Colonial Way, from the tie-in just west of Reichert Drive and Bouchard to the Colonial School.
So can I ask what else I have to do to get that area looked at? Because I have taken pictures, I've sent it in. It's been 2-3 years now that I've been doing that, and there's grass growing. It's an area that the mayor and I were talking about. The soccer's played there a lot. It's well-used park. I don't know what else I have to do. Every time I've asked, I've been told it's part of the program, you got to wait your turn. Now you're telling me no, so I'm just really frustrated because that's not being dealt with.
Yeah.
So a couple ways we can get it on the program is
Okay.
bring it up at the quarterly.
Again.
And, yeah, we can include it for next year, or send Mike pictures of, sorry, CAO pictures of exactly what you want, and then, yeah, we'll bring it up at the quarterly, and if we can get some traction from council, we'll get it on the go. CAO?
I was just going to add, and Ms. Lewin just suggested it, that I can appreciate that it's something that's of interest to somebody and they want it to be repaired, but we have standards and it must not be meeting those standards for repair. Otherwise, we would have done it.
Honestly, it's a crack right down the middle. I don't know if this is seen there.
Okay, yeah, we'll, tell you what, we'll bring it up at the quarterly, we'll discuss the standard about it then, and we'll move on. Sorry, you got anything you want to talk about?
What's that?
You got another one?
I apologize about the playground, but if anyone has any before that.
Okay, Councillor Daniluk, we'll come back to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Lewin, again, with the urban renewal program, I noticed road repairs, and the reasoning is poor subgrade compaction, poor compaction material, high water table, and light asphalt overlay for both reasons. A bit of a dead horse for me, I guess, but it just seems we're doing repair work that, if it is light asphalt overlay, it wasn't properly put in the first place. So the developers put these roads in, and I guess has enough reasonable time since passed that it now needs to be repaired at our expense at $1.775 million. I guess it's a bit frustrating that we're repairing these roads relatively soon after they were put in, relatively speaking. So I guess my question is, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought there, but I'm not trying to blame the developer, but it just seems a lot of money for us to repair roads that should have been properly done in the first place. I mean, poor or light asphalt overlay means they cheaped out, or they didn't follow standards, or they did, and the standards were poor 10 years ago. I guess what I'm getting at, is there any way we can ensure that our developers are building roads properly to avoid us spending $1.7 million to repair roads 10 years later?
Well, this is, yeah, 15 or 20, but yeah.
Maybe 15 or 20, but...
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Daniluk. So this, yes, we've changed our standards. They're certainly higher now than they were back in the early 90s when these two roads were built.
Okay.
We have better inspection processes in place now, and we have, I guess, higher standards for our construction completion and our final acceptance of developers' infrastructure. I can't say what happened back then, but I do know, just for information's sake, Colonial Estates does have a really high water table. Two of these areas have been noted, and the roads are collapsing, so we need to do some repairs now before they get far worse than they already are.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Newkirk, follow? Or a new one?
Yeah, I would go new, but if we're not done the old, the old one could fit. New one? Okay. So I'd like to bring a discussion forward around the 625 and 50th Street intersection upgrades for $500,000 here. Page 41 of 81 on the hard copy. So, as I alluded to last night, I have a hard time with this one as presented, and I'd like to hear some discussion around why we'd want to do this now. I'm not debating the merit of the upgrade in the future because I believe that's required. Having no timeline on 625's twinning, we're still working through two different plans, as we heard last night around we're still working on the traffic plan, the traffic study, and the other plan. I forget the name of it off the top of my head right now. But there's two plans on top of the ASP plan on the other side. I do think the timing is off on this. I heard the safety card tossed out last night. I wholly expect that to hear that again. I don't discount that. There's a potential for a crash at any intersection. That is a major intersection. I get it, but I would challenge the timing on this right now. Right in the old paragraph, it says, in addition, in discussions with Alberta Transportation, they were looking at future upgrades to 625, which could result in any work potentially being throwaway costs. So I have a really hard time looking at spending $500,000 to widen that intersection going south and align the roads right now, when we don't know what the bigger picture on timing and what the outcome of these plans that we're doing is going to be. So I would suggest that we take this $500,000 and we kick that can down the road until we hear what the outcome of our plans are, and that's what I would propose at this time. Looking forward to comments from other councillors on that and admin's response.
Well, let's hear from admin first, and then we'll be back. CEO, sorry.
The discussions that have been had regarding that intersection are very much along those lines, and timing, I agree, timing is the right question to ask, whether we got the right answer or not. We talked a little bit about it last night. It is response to that intersection and to feedback that we receive. Is it absolutely critical and needs to be done now? The answer is no. It was a decision that was made that we propose it to council. If there's no desire that we wait and see what the bigger picture of with Alberta Transportation is, then that's the decision we go.
Follow up then.
Okay, so yeah, so the question is do we want to go now or do we want to wait?
So I would propose that we kick this can down the road and we wait and see what our plans give us. Where, you know, we had a lot of discussion last night and we put a lot of weight in these plans, and, you know, and I quizzed the timing, I quizzed administration on the timing of the plans, and I think got the answer that we're looking for is that the plans are going to go like this. Like the game, like at the hockey game, how the cars go, and then hopefully they're going to come to the finish line at about the same time, so we can start making some good decisions. Does this need done? Yes. Is the intersection safe or not safe? You know, yes or no. Is it any safer or unsafe than any other intersection onto that road? I would definitely suggest no. So I would propose kicking this can down the road for $500,000 here, and look forward to what other councillors have to say.
Fair enough. Councillor Mungo-Swain?
Yeah, I'm not going to spend any time on it. I support removing this out. This is not part of our, doesn't come out of our reserves. If I look at it, we have added quite a few things through this budget, and if we're going to add things, we need to look at options to potentially subtract away. This is a significant chunk that we could take away to help pay for a lot of those other additions that we thought valuable. So I don't support moving. I don't support this item in the budget.
Okay, Councillor Hendricks.
Perhaps to the
Mr. Harris, sorry, I just saw his hand.
As indicated when we first started the capital discussion, this $500,000 cannot be used for anything else other than 50th Street. So it cannot be repurposed to other capital projects. That's an agreement that we have with the province.
So it would just sit and wait until
it
we're
will
ready
sit
to move.
and wait, yes.
That's fine, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, so I'm not saying repurpose. I'm just saying, so if I'll put it in, you know, I'm a simple guy. I'll put it in simple terms. Right now, we've added things up and we're looking at a potential 2% increase, right? If we take the $500,000 out, what does it do to that? What does it do to that 2% increase?
Through your worship, none of these projects will impact the taxes today. This $500,000 will not impact the taxes today. What these projects do, is if they're using reserve funds, is that they deplete the reserve funds, and if we don't, and then you'll see that in the 10-year capital, if we don't replace those reserve funds at a proper rate, then yes, we'll have to increase taxes. So specific to the 2%, no, it doesn't have an impact. Over the long term, it will have an impact, because you'll have to, when we get into the 5-10-year capital, when you see in 2024, when we're in a negative number, the way to get forward on that is either move projects back or increase the amount of reserves allocation to your reserves, so that, you know, to balance that out, that's what you'd need to have. So
Sure.
Again,
but we're beating a dead horse, but go ahead.
No, the reason we're beating a dead horse is because I'm not getting the explanation I need. I still don't understand, and that's on me. Take away this year's budget conversation, and I misspoke on that. But ultimately, you know, we're going to have a discussion down the road about saving for capital items. and by not funding this right now, that potentially helps towards saving for those capital items?
Well, with regards to this specific project, no, because it's not being funded out of reserves. It's being funded out of a specific grant that can only be used for 50th Street, so it doesn't impact the reserves.
Thank you.
So,
That's the clarification.
Yeah, the question is, it'll just sit in abeyance until we're ready to go forward.
Yes.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, and if I wasn't clear to earlier, that's how I understood it, is that, you know, what I'm talking about here, I'm not questioning the spend, I'm purely questioning the timing on the spend, understanding that the money is for 50th Street. I hate to spend some dollars here that, you know, that we throw away later. That's my point. That the timing is what I brought forward. So
Okay, one final comment from Councillor Hendricks, then we'll vote on whether or not this is staying in or out.
Sure, I'll just put a bow on this then. This was part of the 50th Street functional study process, and at the time, the reason why this wasn't done really was because we were going through the annexation piece, and we needed to get the land on the other side, which is on the south side, to be able to create the alignment. So now that we've got the land, we can create the alignment. This is dollars that come out of the 50th Street functional study agreement to finish it up. But if now our friends at the province, highways, are going to do something, and I discussed this the other day regarding going to a primary status as compared to secondary, and we're close to getting that in terms of the axle counts on that road. That'll change that layout again. So those dollars won't go away. RCMP mentioned in their quarterly report that there's stepped up enforcement because there are people going straight south on the right turn on the west side. That's not good. That's where the concern is in terms of safety. But they have stepped up enforcement. So.
Fair enough.
So I understand the concern regarding throwaway costs, because if if the highway turns into primary status, then what? So I guess we can still wait.
Okay, so the motion before council is to remove, sorry to flip my page, remove the Highway 625 50th Street intersection upgrades for $500,000 from the budget. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none. All in favor? Or sorry, I guess it's deferring it, it's not removing it. Councillor Stout. That carries 7-0. So we're going to defer that project for at least a year. Councillor Munkoff Swain, new project.
New project. Playground Colonial Estates, 35K. Mr. Harris, page 44. I sent you a document before. This is our 2015 master plan, recreational master plan. You can see number 7 up there. Maybe zoom in if you don't mind for those of us that are blind. So, 2015, we talked about $80,000 to $100,000 investment in a pocket park in Colonial Estates in that northeast section, exactly where this is going. Question for Mr. Hiltz. Could you explain the difference, why here it was recommended at $80,000 to $100,000 versus we've got $35,000 in the budget? I understand there's some setback requirements. Could you just speak to that, please?
In terms of play structure, Your Worship and members of council, is that you have to fit it within the space the allocated space that you have, and you have to have setbacks from the road, you have to have setbacks from property lines, etc. What we're proposing, because this is a very small park, it'd be very similar to what they have for a structure in Montrose, and that was a $32,000 play structure, given the size of that park. What they were looking at here, for an $80,000 to $100,000 for a play structure by itself, that would be something that you'd put in a significantly large park. I don't have the background information on this. This was before my time, if they were looking at other amenities that they were adding with that. But as far as a play structure goes, we would not be able to fit something at $80,000 to $100,000 into that space.
Thank you. And just a follow-up comment. I certainly support this proposal. I think the people in front of us on Tuesday did a good job linking it back to our strategic plan. We spoke about that. So I support this initiative and think we should move forward with it.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
On the playground Colonial Estates at $35,000, one of the questions that I would have asked on Tuesday and that I need to ask now is 35,000, I think that number's low. I have no basis for that, and I want a little bit of justification for that number. Are we talking pipes and plastic is going to get us 35,000? Are we talking pipes, plastic, a garbage can, a bench, all the cement, the land preparations, the movement and replacement of trees in other spot, all coming in at 35,000? Because I think if you talk about the civil works, the fact that you need a bench there, you should have a garbage can there, and you're going to buy the pipes and plastic, I think 35,000 is low. Comments on that?
Mr. Hiltz?
Your Worship and members of council, $35,000 will get you the structure, it'll get you the bench, and it'll get you a garbage can, and it'll get you the basic groundworks. It does not include, if you're wanting to, let's say, relocate one of the berms, it would not include that, because that'd be earthworks, but the $35,000 structure would fit within the existing footprint of that park. Right now, there's not trees that would need to be moved, and the trees are young enough that you'd be able to do that fairly inexpensively within an internal labor. But in terms of comparing it, last year in Mount Rose, we spent $32,000 on a very similar sized structure.
Okay, follow up?
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the information. That satisfies me, I would say. The last comment I would make is I would tie it back to our survey, which Parks and Trails is number one on the survey as identified by residents. So my support is 125.5% towards this one at 35,000 moving forward. So thank you.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship, and most of my questions have been answered thanks to my colleagues. That was where I was going. I fully support this playground. My question remains around process with the groups that are very, obviously lots of families and parents in the area are wanting to be part of this project, and I'm wondering whether the administration is going to engage and help to get some of the decisions in terms of what kind of equipment to put in there. Obviously, the requests are going to be more than the space can hold, because I did drive by it myself and realized that there's only so much can go there because it's not that big of a space. So I'm just wondering what that engagement might look like, and I think it's important to keep the volunteers involved and to there's going to be some community issues there already are. So I'm just wondering how that's going to look and what plans are in place, not to just go build it in the middle of the night, which I don't think we would do, but to try to work towards a park that everyone can enjoy.
Question, Mr. Hiltz.
Yep, so thank you, Your Worship, members of council. The last couple play structure installations, we have had these I can't think of the right word for it, but it's like open houses at the park, and we've done stuff about, we've had display boards up there, we've had stickers, we've had everything else, and people are picking what they want and the activity they want. We're looking at needs, looking at demographics today and where the demographic trends are going to go, and then we have to look at the space. And so usually what happens is we put that out as a fairly, the RFP goes out as based on the community input we receive. We say that we need stuff for, swinging, jumping, climbing, etc., and then they provide packages for us under that budget.
All right, so I'm not hearing any negativities against the park, so I think we'll just leave it in the budget. All right, new project, Councillor Van Newkirk.
I'd like to have a discussion around 2019, so page 42 of 81 in the hard copy. 2019 Four Seasons Estates drainage remediation at $65,000. I've spent time in that area on the roads talking to residents who back that, and the note I've made here is what is the bigger picture problem here? It says the project involves connecting the concrete swale built in 2018 to mitigate standing water issues. So my question to administration is if we build that swale, it will mitigate the standing water issues, but is that just a Band-Aid solution for the bigger problem that there are design issues further to that are going to persist even after we put this $65,000 towards the problem? I don't know the answer, just looking for some comment from administration on that.
I do remember there were some connectivity issues to stormwater ponds for structure further up that hasn't been built, but
that's where I'm going with this. Yep.
Let administration. Ms. Lewin?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to members of council. So this project is coming forward. So when Four Seasons Estates was initially constructed, They have one stormwater management facility kind of in the center part of the neighborhood, and then everything kind of drains out to the northwest, which passes through Montrose Estates and then into Rousseau. What's happening now is that there's a lot of walkout basements, and a lot of, and this neighborhood was built back when we did not have what our third pipe system. So all of the sump pump discharge is surface discharge instead of into underground system. What the residents in this neighborhood have done is buried their sump pump discharge hoses under their lawns so that it didn't soak their own property, and then discharges that property line and then goes out the back and then floods this area. So we have constructed concrete soils. We have worked with municipal enforcement to ensure that these sump pump hoses are detached from that area and being able to use that on their property instead of discharging it on public property. But I guess just over the years, the ground is saturated. We have done some work in there previous when we built the trail, and we're still facing some drainage issues. So this swale will be able to pick up that extra water and move it out of the neighborhood as quickly as we can.
Follow up, yep. So for myself, Thank you for the answer. I get it. The swale is only going to work for overland flow. I think there's still a bigger problem that persists here, and I think we have to ask ourselves, how do we get to this situation? I'm going to loop in a relevant, or a 3/4 relevant piece of information to this whole conversation as well. We just took the bulldozer to a wetland in the adjacent neighborhood here, which is actually a groundwater discharge area, as that's why it's a wetland, is because of that. There's going to be 2 lots that are built in those pies, as it looks like from the beginning, and we're creating another situation in this area for residents. We've ended up in this situation. So back over to Four Seasons here, we're in this situation because of residents have had to create their own solution to the problem. And I think I don't understand the world, but I think there were some oversights in water management handling and expectations as this whole subdivision was constructed. And is there a bigger solution here than just laying some superficial sidewalk or some superficial swales down that needs to be looked at and thought about and capitalized and prioritized here for these residents? In a wet period, you can't even walk in the grass around this thing because it's so wet. And some of us have been there and we know. So comments to that?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Van Newkirk. So as part of my position, we've looked at looking at all of the neighborhoods that don't have storm sewers in the streets. Four Seasons does have storm sewers in most of the neighborhood, but unfortunately their sump pumps are not connected. That's something that we could look at doing. I know that I've considered that in the past. There's been communities like Strathcona County who have offered like it was a sump pump rebate program, so we would contribute to them putting in the sump pumps. This is fine, they already have them, but we would contribute money to be able to have them connect into the pipe system. But with that, we likely would have to increase the size of the pipe in the street. So this is a huge infrastructure cost that, I guess, looking at cost benefit analysis, is this something that we want to do? There's plenty of older neighborhoods in Beaumont that are still connected to the sanitary sewer with their weeping tiles. And that's something that we have to look at correcting as well through the Alberta Capital Region Wastewater Commission. So all of these things are being looked at. No formal plans are in place, but that's something that we could revisit for this neighborhood to try to reduce water in the park areas.
Follow up, yep.
Yeah, so I don't profess to know the solution here, but I think the issues that I'm aware of have been brought forward. I don't question the necessity of solutions. I don't know, I don't live there. I don't know what the $65,000 swale is going to help if we don't have 100% compliance on surface water flow into that gutter to flow down the road. To send bylaw in there to make sure people comply with a Band-Aid solution that we're putting forward. We're going to hear about that. We're going to hear about that behind this bench as well. I'm certain of it. I don't know where to go, Mayor. There's a bigger picture problem here. There's a potential program to consider. There's sewer upgrades to consider.
Well, I think this project will help, but I think you're right, and Ms. Loon has alluded to putting in some effort to figure out what those bigger solutions are.
What might the solution be, right? When we have residents year over year having their basements flooded because of drainage issues in an area that we've worked with developers to develop, and then directly east of it, adjacent to it, we're setting ourselves up for this again because we've bulldozed a wetland and we've eliminated a groundwater recharge area and the ability to flow that. They best buy 4 sump pumps. So, yeah, anyways.
I get it, but we're not going to come up with a solution today.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're going to have to put some work.
So am I done beating it then?
I'm going to throw that one back at admin, and we'll catch up at the quarterly.
Perfect, thank you. I made my point. Thank you.
All right, moving on, next one. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering if what I read here, maybe a wish come true, but there won't be any further, looking at St. Vital pump house upgrades. So big expenditure there, meeting the water demands for our community. So if this happens, then we won't be faced with the water restrictions to the extent that we have been in the past couple of years. Is that our hope and wish?
Ms. Lewin?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Barnhart. So we have conducted an operational study on the St. Vital pump house earlier this year, and with that study, if we do these pump upgrades, then we should be able to better utilize the water that's in there. It's 10 megaliters, so it's 10 million liters of water that sits in there. Unfortunately, the way that the pumping system is set up is that we cannot operate when there's peak flow demands. From the main pump house, we can do that, obviously, but we can't accommodate that through the St. Vital pump house. Our pumps just can't accommodate that flow. So upgrading these will be able to allow us to move water from there instead of it just sitting there. We can pump it back and forth, but not during peak times. So this will allow us to do that through peak flow, and we'll be able to better utilize both of our pump houses.
Nice.
And not have to go into water restrictions.
Councillor Hendricks.
Your Worship, I'm excited to hear this. We've had a lot of conversation about reservoirs and certainly the water issues that come with it. Are these staged pumps? Is this a staged pump system?
The main pump house is staged. We have everything else out of St. Vital running basically on timers. So we only pump out during non-peak time, so like 9 a.m. till I think 3 p.m. or something like that.
So just my days as the chair of the Southwest United Water Commission, we looked at all our systems, including Beaumont, and we settled a couple of the pinch points issues, which was the pinch point of pipes being reduced in size as they came into Beaumont, to the first pump house, if you will. At that time, we did a study on the pumps, and we were going to do a staged system. And I think we're replacing one of those pumps now, also in this report. That's why I'm wondering about St. Vital. It's like almost like a demand pump that stages up as the horsepower is required, as compared to, as you say, on a timer basis. All the pumps that are in the pump house on the highway that feed the Southwest United Water Commission are all staged. Right, and they ramp up as the demand ramps up, and that system was replaced back then with me as part of that process. It was really interesting because it got rid of our need to have a guy constantly adjusting pumps as the flow demand happened. So I'm just thinking that we should be hopefully working down some kind of technical process without a timer attached to it. So right now,
There's 5 pumps in the main pump house. There's only 2 in the St. Vital pump house. So right now it is staged in the main, so as demand increases, additional pumps kick in. Once this pump upgrade is done in St. Vital, we'll be able to stage them in such a way where if we have demands in certain areas, we'll be able to either utilize 1 or 2 pumps at one of them and the other ones to be able to, even out that demand. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Margoff Swain.
Thank you. $630,000 is a lot of cake. So I sit on the Water Commission and know that we're looking at providing at solutions to provide better capacity into Beaumont for our future growth. You talk about bridging a gap here. So right now we have a planned construction to upgrade this. The way I read this is that we're spending $630,000 to bridge that gap. So I'm hoping you can paint a better picture around what does that gap look like? Are we talking 1, 2? Are we talking 5 to 10 years? I totally understand the need and the community justified conversation that happens when the spray part goes down. But so that went down once this year, and if we're spending $630,000 to fix that problem, I didn't say little, that problem. To me, I'd like to have that discussion and whether there's value in that, or whether it's better to save on to that. So when we do get those connections coming in, is there better value to put it that way? So just a discussion around that. What does bridging the gap mean?
With these pump upgrades, this will allow us to continue development, especially development south of 625. This will kind of bridge that gap before another reservoir is required in the west annexed lands. I don't have that study in front of me right now, but I do know that there was looking at our old footprint to the new footprint and what that looks like for full build out of our community. And doing these upgrades now will obviously allow us to not have water restrictions in the summer during peak demand, but it'll also allow us to build out like Lakeview, build out parts of south of 625 and start in the west lands as well. And then of course we're going to have another reservoir on that land just so that we're looping our water system.
Okay, so perfect explanation. It's not a short-term fix just to keep the spray part going for a little bit. It's a long-term piece, so I support it, so thank you.
Councillor Stowe.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to refer us back to an email that I received from Ms. Mohammed on 11th of June, where she says our total available storage is 17.7 cubic meters, sorry, 17,700 cubic meters. The only way to fill the San Vital reservoir is to pump water from the main reservoir, which is done during non-peak times. Pump upgrades are required at the San Vital pump house to allow pumping of water through the system during peak periods. The current setup cannot accommodate the amount of water required for peak volumes. This is something we will be requesting in the upcoming budget. Am I correct in assuming that this is that?
You're exactly right, yes.
Thank you. So, yes, I certainly support that.
And no, I'm on board. Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question on page 43 of 81, the self-contained breathing apparatus for the fire department.
We're still on pump house.
Oh, sorry. I thought we were done with the pump house.
No.
I'll come back to that then.
Yeah. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thank you. I support this one. There's one more piece of clarity that almost came out, I think. Am I hearing that if we don't have this pump, we don't realize the full potential of our piece of infrastructure at St. Vital? As in, we don't have the ability to use the entire capacity without this pump? I believe that's what I'm hearing.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right now, we are not able to utilize that storage as
Yeah.
best as we can.
Yeah, and that hits the nail on the head for me, and that's the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Councillor Hendricks, last comment. We'll wrap this up.
Part of that's the fire reserve, right? We have to have that as part of the NFPA 13 requirements, and we added a whole bunch of fire hydrants in the old Block Brothers subdivision to meet all those requirements. So the fire reserve in the reservoir is very important, and that cuts out any other consumption pieces. This pump, amen to that this is finally going to get past us.
Okay, seeing no real opposition to this anymore, we're moving on. Councillor Daniluk.
Worship, so my earlier point a moment ago on the breathing apparatus, I see in the report we're looking for upgrading 20 of the apparatus themselves. The only question I have is, I know the fire chief probably put this request in from his work. Does that actually suffice and get all the apparatus replaced, or they have 30, we need 20 for sure, but we got 10 more to replace down the road, or are we doing them all right now?
We're doing them all right now.
Okay, good. That's my assumption, so I support that. Thank you.
Yeah, I can chime in on that if I had to, but yeah. Councillor Van Nuker? I'm not going to, yeah.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Daniluk, through your worship. We do have the outcome of the Fire Services Master Plan coming as well. Is this spend cart ahead of the horse on that master plan?
No, this needs to be done. Our stuff's old.
For sure, for sure.
Right out of whack.
I agree, but we are putting a lot of weight in the plans that we put forward, and we are waiting for other decisions that we make on spends until we see the big picture of a plan. My point is not that I don't support this, but my point is, similar to what I've said in the past, we put a lot of weight in process, and then we're making exceptions. You know, if the Fire Services Master Plan is coming forward, and this is one of 5 spends that we may have to prioritize because there isn't money for them all, this is my point. I'm sure that administration has vetted it to this point to get here, but I do need to make the point that if we're spending money on studies and plans, and we don't have the full picture, and we're picking and choosing what we're going to put on the agenda based on that, I just want council to be eyes open to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. This is a health and safety issue. This won't even be covered in the plan. This is a day-to-day operation that is required to meet standard, so this won't even be addressed in that plan.
Yeah. Okay. Follow up and then yeah. So I wasn't questioning the spend. I'm questioning the process, right? So that's my point.
Fair enough. Councilman Goswayne.
Just really quickly, I mean, I had, I'll call it the pleasure of using one of these apparatuses to go into that hot sea can, and I mean, it was made very evident the need from a safety perspective. I totally get the piece, but hearing administration say that this is equipment, not part of the larger planning piece. So I was grateful that it did its job, but it's hanging on its last legs.
Councillor Stout, last comment, then we're going to wrap it up.
I just want to reinforce what Councillor Monkovsky has just said. I didn't get the opportunity to go to the hot sea can because I couldn't get one of these things to give me a complete seal over facial hair. So the underlying point is, though, that in order to do that, to go into that environment, the user has to have complete confidence that this is working and operational. And if there's any doubt about that, then we replace the units and get new ones. Absolutely, completely support the need to do this.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Stout. Does anybody have any more projects? Because I think we've pretty much been through them all anyway. Okay, so seeing no... Sure.
On the vehicles, thank you, Worship. On the various vehicles, I have difficulty imagining what a pickup truck I can imagine, but some of the more specialised vehicles, I'm not sure what it is. And is it possible in the presentation just to include an illustration, a photograph?
Sure.
Through your worship, yes, we can add some photographs.
Okay.
I think that would help. Just conveying what it is we're actually spending the money on.
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, just an overall comment on the presentation of this. it's a big piece of work to bring this all together, and one of the things that I appreciated last year and carry over to this year is the descriptions that were put under these. I think this discussion would have been 2 hours longer had the descriptions not been handled well in this document that was presented to us, so thank you for that, and Councillor Stout, illustrations would be helpful, I think, so thank you.
Okay, we're losing councillors. Moving on, 2019 draft multi-year capital plan. Appendix 4.
That's appendix. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just, I realize that you have the stuff before you. I'm going to, this is your 2019 10-year capital. The colors all have rationale and so forth. But where I want to show you is, I guess, would be, I'll go back to the presentation. 1 second here. So this is the important page at the end of the day. There are projects in there.
Which page are we on?
We're going to page, I guess it would be 68. Yeah, 68 of 81. The important is the funding kind of a deal, so I'm going to just blow it up. So this gives a break. Whoops, went down one page too many. There we go. So I'll go across. Now, it's on this screen, it's a little difficult to have everything in. That's why I'm going to go to my Excel spreadsheet just for a second. And then I'm going to just hide some columns so that gives a better breakdown. So here we go, we'll just hide those. So what you see here is an analysis of the capital in the different years. So at the top, you'll see in 2019, 33 million, 2020, 22.8, 2021, 12, 2022, 10, 2023, 27, and then 2024, 8. And then funding. So what you've done, the first year in 2019, it shows it coming out of each of the individual reserves. And from 2020 on, what it is just a combination of where there are specific items coming out, and that relates to offsite levy programs and how those are funded. Then there's a balance that has to be funded. So the funding source to be determined yearly for 2020 and going forward shows $10 million. And then you have the breakdown of all the reserves and grants and how what's available. And then so you see at the bottom that you have 18 million available at 2020. Where the problem is in 2024 when we're $14 million short.
Which is going to allow me to get back on my bandwagon with the province, who's funding this through all of this stuff through MSI grant dollars, and then they're stopping and they haven't given us any replacements for that program. So once again, strong fiscal framework from the province. Members of council, anytime you get near an MLA or a cabinet, like in government, please, strong fiscal framework needed. Thank you. Sorry, I'll get off my box. Sorry, Mr. Harris. Didn't mean
No, that's, I'm going to just, wait a second, I'm just going to move this off the page. So what staff have looked at it, there's, in regards to the timing of projects, you'll notice that outside of the offsite levy programs, and I'm trying to find it here, these blue projects. So these are all based on prior years studies that have been done and will be updated based on the new Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And so there's baseball diamonds, amphitheater, outdoor gym equipment, outdoor swimming pool, soccer fields, and down the line, right? And you'll notice that a lot of them have been put to 2050. And what happens the way the program does, so that we don't lose track of it, it goes all the way into the very final year. And you can see that there's like $60 million in the final year. And we can expand this longer and so forth, but when we go back down to, and we get away from the offsite levies, and you go to the analysis, whoops, I went one too far. Sorry, I want to be back on 68. Come on, let me go. There we go. So you're going to see on this little thing, is $201 million in the hole, of which again 68 million is being carried forward to prior years. So you're about $140 million. So yes, in regards to grants, that's important. If we assume that the grants are one third, or say 50% worst case scenario, we'll still need to find $100 million or spread these out over different times. So I can put it out further and so forth. So we still need to look at building reserves along with the grants, because grant funding, generally speaking, isn't 100%. So we'll need to also build those up. It's just a matter of when do we start to do that. A lot of these are debt finance. What we do in our budget, when a debt financing drops on a particular item, it gets put into reserve. That's what we've done for BSRC. In regards to, there is some recreation or chemical debt that's going to fall off, and it's being put into reserve, or it's being offset, sorry, now it's going to be offset to reduce the cost of the debt for the BSRC, as opposed to putting into reserve. So that we looked at that option. So that's included in the 5-year. So you're trying to mother the two in together, sync them. And so I believe that because the majority of the stuff relates to offsite levies, and we're good till 2023, but 2024 is still more. There will be adjustments. So I think with the master recreation plan, Parks and Recreation Plan being completed this year, all these things will be updated. This can be continued beyond just 10 years, put it out to 20 years, have a better thing. This will also, with our asset management plan, all these projects will be added into the asset management plan based on the reserve, on assumptions of when things are being done. So though there is concern right now, council can control what they spend. Though there may be residents or citizens that aren't as happy because things aren't being built right now, we can manage over this for sure over the next 2 years and go from there. And the other thing is, in regards to offsite levies, and I know Ms. Mohammed isn't here, it's if we can work with the developers to do front-end costs, that is a good way to reduce the liabilities and so forth. So yeah, just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I appreciate the explanation given. Yeah, it's tough, and there's major holes going from 2024 out.
Yep.
There is a couple of projects that I don't see on here. One was, we've been talking about the CCBCC soundproofing, and so just like to get a quick update on that, and I don't want that one to get forgotten because that's a bit of a pain point. Mr. Hiltz.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. This has been a very frustrating project, even for the administration. We started the process for getting a pricing probably in late spring. We brought in two different companies for sound engineers. They requested that we brought in an architect who specializes in designing for sound, so we did that. Got a small report, give it back to the engineers for pricing. We're getting kind of non-committal responses back because of the complexity of this. One of them is recommending coming from the top down. One of them is kind of talking about a cheaper option of going from the bottom, but neither one of them will kind of commit to any kind of outcomes. So we're still trying to work through this process and trying to bring in something that's a little bit more stable than saying it could be $100,000 or it could be $500,000. It could impact programs for 6 months. It could be something that may have a very minimal impact. And we're trying to get around what exactly that means before we kind of come back to council to say this is what this cost is. If we can get this within, the next few months back to council, then we'll be able to potentially ask with a budget adjustment. But we have to kind of see where that kind of sits in terms of the overall costs of this.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate the update on that. It's nice to see that you're all over it and moving forward with it. So that would be great. The other one that's come up and this is probably more of a discussion for council to get it on this list, was waste transfer stations, specifically an RV dump coming forward. So is there will to put that one on the list? Because like that one came up a ton and it still comes up a ton. That might be a quarterly thing, you're right. We'll bring it back to the quarterly. All right, Councillor Montguswain.
Thank you, Worship. I kind of hinted at it yesterday. I'm just wondering, when is the time for me to get on my fiscal responsibility philosophical conversation soapbox? When do we want to go through all the service levels, or do we, now we're at the capital plan, it's fresh in front of our minds and we can see what's ahead of us? When do you want to have that conversation?
Is there specific questions about the 10-year capital plan, and then we'll have that conversation? Okay, we'll let Councillor, we'll come back to you.
I got a big picture question, and then I have a littler picture question. I'll start with the big picture question. So when we look out and we project this, there was a little bit of comment made around developers, and I just want to drive into that a little bit. Even in my time on council here, we've had developers come in, and there's been okay, let me preface this. I am not anti-development. I am not anti-developers. I am not anti one developer to another. I am neutral on that, and I promote all the growth in Beaumont that we can get that's sustainable and responsible. Okay, here I go. So developers come into council and they get a plan approved with 35 lots. 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through the process, they come back and say we've sold this many due to the changing market conditions and desire to increase density levels in the MGA and this and that and the other thing. We propose the last 10 lots to be split this way, and it ends up making 3 more lots for them to sell, and put some more jingle in their jeans, and it changes the goalposts for that neighborhood that were agreed upon. I get it. I understand what the planning department. I've had this conversation with CEO Schwartz, and I understand what the planning department's metrics are to approve those things. And there's not a whole bunch of reason to say no. Fair, I get it, but in business, there's no reason you can't say what do I get out of it. I think we need to start saying where's our share and what do I get out of that, to the tune of $35,000 for a pocket park. I think through some stronger negotiations and thinking about things less about ticking off boxes and more about the bigger picture and the whole of what we can get. When a developer comes and says, can we make these changes, and it ticks off all these boxes, and inherently, myself and other councillors are sitting here figuring, how many more lots does that get them? Well, that gets them 1 or 2 at $200,000 or $300,000 a piece, whatever. We don't want to starve our developers. But I suggest that we start thinking about pressuring them a little bit to share in some of that wealth and put it back into the municipal reserve, or part of what they're doing, or into a pocket park in a community. So that's the big picture comment. I don't know if that's a question or a comment, but I think it's more of a challenge for administration is to think beyond just ticking the boxes of increased densities in the MGA, increased diversity in housing around affordability and whatever else. We do, eyes wide open, we are changing the goalposts in that neighborhood, to people's point time and time again that what's built here isn't what I signed up for and what I was told. Fair, I understand things change, but yeah, that's it. I've made my point.
Okay, what's your little question?
Little question. There's an item in the blue here around the gym equipment and special project research. I think it's $65,000. We've done some work in this budget to date to hammer home the number one thing which was in the survey, which was parks and trails. So we've done some work to that, but when you look at the survey, it's the number one thing by quite a ways besides municipal enforcement, and I think we've addressed some of that too. I wonder if there might be an appetite to look at that project and propose starting some, I'm not saying the whole spend this year, but perhaps we get a plan and a phased approach going to this. No matter what we do, we're going to have to look at a map and pick spots and then source out what type of equipment, and there will be people in the community who have a better idea than this. There's consultants who have done this all over in other municipalities. I think it would be pretty cool to hop on. I envision a time when people are circuit training around Beaumont, and I think people will 100% do that. I propose moving that forward and getting a little bit of a start on that this year, see what council's appetite is for that and what the ability to split that up might be.
Is that part of the master plan conversation?
That could be
A
there
little
too.
bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So maybe we just need to push it back into there. That's why I didn't bring it up during.
Let's push it back, wait till that plan's done,
Okay.
and then we'll have that greater discussion, and they can keep it on their radar for perhaps budget 2020.
Yeah.
Was that clear? You guys told me, did you get that?
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that this doesn't get buried till 2025 or
Yeah,
something,
fair.
because I think it's an important piece moving forward. So I'll bring it up during my abilities to provide input into the rec master plan.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thank you.
Councillor Hendricks.
And on the same topic of miscellaneous items on the capital budget, and it may be in here again somewhere, but Ken Nickel had his study completed, and some time ago, and certainly I see the roof, phase 2 is in this package, that's great. There was also the elastomeric coatings for the exterior face, that I'll just throw in more at you, and then there was the air balancing requirement for the entire facility. So, just wondering where it's at.
So these are all Your Worship and members of council, these are all the items that were identified in that 2012 study. That is all completed now. So I'd have to get back. I did send out, I think, about a year ago. I'll have to go back to my notes and stuff like that, where everything was, and basically prioritized. But I believe that everything in that study has been completed.
Okay.
So this is kind of outside that study now. We need to do the roof.
Right. So where I'm at is the elastomeric coatings. Visually would have changed the look of the place. So,
okay.
And I haven't seen it change the look of the place.
Okay.
So, and then the balancing report. I've been in there. I've been in the promotions committee area, if I call it that.
Yeah.
And I know there's been new walls and staff and heating and cooling issues, which would probably get serviced by a complete air balance for that area. So, minor miscellaneous, but thank you.
Okay. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So I'm looking at page 67 of 81, the blue area that some of the councillors have already mentioned. There's a football field on there, and there's a yellow column, current year cost. So is the football field going to be upgraded this year, or has it been? Or?
Through Your Worship, to the rest of the council, just to explain how the worksheet, and I'm bringing it up to the football fields, how the worksheet works. You'll see the description of the item, then you'll see a year. The year is the year that it's going to take place, so that's been shown as 2050.
That's a 5.
Yeah, 2050. And the current year cost is the cost that it would cost, the thought of the cost of today, and then for every year, there is an inflation factor of 2.5% that is added, as you can see at the top. And so the calculation goes through and comes up with, in that case, in a year, we only go to 2028. Whoops, went too far. This thing doesn't like me. My apologies, let me use the mouse. You'll note that the amount in 2050 that's been identified, once I get there, it takes forever, is 439,600. So there's a calculation that it goes through and does, and again, I can extend it beyond, it's been always done on a 10-year basis. So the current year cost is theoretically the cost today, and then it gets projected out to the year that it occurs.
So if I'm understanding correctly, what is listed here, unless it says, and none of them do, say 2019, these are all below the line. These are not funded this year.
Yeah, the ones that are in 2019 will show up in the 2019 column. It currently ties into what the, plus the carry forwards. When you go to the 2019 column, and we go down one more page, because it's going to be on the last page. just flip through. So you just go down. There we go. Is 33,153,929 in 2019.
So these were, just to follow on, if I may, Mr. Mayor, these were items that were identified, relatively prioritized when we did the last recreation facility review. As the previous council looked at some of the things like amphitheater, I remember that discussion, football field was put on the list. A number of these items were raised then and continue to be raised, but they keep falling below the line for obvious reasons. We don't have enough money to do everything we want to do. So for council now and in the future, what's the process for us to move some of these things back above the line? It's during budget time. It's now.
Well, part of it will be the master recreation and parks plan, and council can move anything anywhere that they want, just recognizing that you need the money to fund it.
Mr. Schultz?
Yeah, thank you, worship members of council, and that's exactly what we did in this case, is that all those projects that were previously identified, we'd move them all to the future, because we're going through the master plan right now, and that's going to provide that 10-year window to what those needs and everything are based on for the community and stuff. So they'll come back and they'll be moved into appropriate years based on that 10-year plan. We didn't want to say beforehand and put something ahead that really wasn't a community requirement at this time.
Councillor Daniluk?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. I think last year we talked at one point, either budget at some point last year, about replacing the ice plants in the Ken Nichols Center. Is that still on the table for a future capital cost? I don't see it on here now, but was it discussed last year at budget? Or I'm having a deja vu of something else, but I thought we talked about replacing the ice plants at some point in the future at the Ken Nichols.
Mr. Hills?
Your worship, members of council, I do not recall that conversation. In looking at our maintenance of our existing plants, compressors, cooling systems and everything else, my understanding is we're good for 10 plus years. Okay. If that changes, if they're not actually identified in that 10-year plan right now, we've gone through some fairly significant reviews over there, so I'm surprised that if it's something we're needing, it would be on that list somewhere.
I think it was maybe when that incident happened in BC with the ammonia plant, we were questioning our facilities, and I thought something about replacement was going to be mentioned in a future capital budget, but I could be wrong on that part of it. But anyhow, if we're good for 10 years, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, we are good.
Through your worship, in regards to all our facilities, as part of the asset management plan, when we go through the facilities, we're going to be identifying the major components of those and replacement dates. So that will be coming forward. This right now is a 30,000 foot level, and it can be drilled down right into a 10-foot level.
Yeah, I'm thinking, in the interest of time, we'll probably, because it's the projected capital plan, we might bring this back to committee of the whole, because I think there's a larger conversation to be had on projecting. So are we good with that? Councillor Margolis-Wayne.
Thank you. And before I go into it, CAO Schwartz, we had several requests that would come up through the year about where's this project at, where's that project at, where's this at, and I think there was some frustration on your side and also from our side. We've asked for a capital request tracker in the past. I'm wondering if we've got X amount of items here in the capital budget that we have, we're about to approve. Could we just set up a formal quarterly process where it just gets emailed out once a quarter and says a rough update on where that's at, to avoid us having to ask the questions and you having to respond to them at random times?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Fiscal responsibility. So we all talked about it in the election, about wanting to be prudent with taxpayer dollars and all that sort of stuff. But what I've found through a couple of budgets here is that we typically focus on the year ahead of us. We spend a lot of our time on the 2019 budget. So the first 45 pages, we spend a lot of time on it and really not much looking at the future. So we've all heard, we all know the capital requests that are coming for us down the road. So I'd like this council to have a discussion about adding definitely having the conversation about franchise fees but also about adding an increase that goes straight to capital savings. And it may not be popular in the short term. Everyone's talking about, trying to limit the tax increase, and I get that. But I think it's prudent to do it in the long term. We can't kick, we see the numbers coming up, 2024 and that sort of thing. We can't kick that burden down the road to that, whatever the council makes up then. If we don't do anything about it now, then at 2024 and beyond, they're going to have to deal with that issue. And I liken it, and again, I'm a pretty simple guy, I liken it, if I need to replace a roof in my house, I know it's going to cost $50,000 in 10 years. I would like to think that I would put away $5,000 a year to be able to pay for that. Not get to the 10th year and be like, okay, I needed $50,000 and I'm going to need a loan and I'm going to have to pay all the interest that results from that. So I think it's prudent for us to have this discussion now so that we can set ourselves up, set the town up for success down the road. So I'd like to have that discussion about whether we want to put in an increase, and I get we do this year to year, but I'd like to see a consistent increase in there to build up those capital reserves.
Yeah, I think it's actually, you make a good point, and I think I'm going to insert that, I'd like council to keep that thought in their head as we go through, because I think reserves is next, capital grants is next, and then once we get down to next steps, that's when we can really get into the meat and decide if we're going to raise the franchise fees, put that extra 2% in, and off we go. But I think if we keep that in our head as we go through these last couple of background items, so that we have the information to be able to fully have that conversation, I think that would be better than trying to have it without.
Yeah, I don't care. That's why I asked when was the right time to have it.
Yeah, no, that's the right time.
So pause for dramatic effect and then just pretend and replay that.
So let's get through reserves. Let's start with reserves, capital grants, debenture funds.
Just a quick order question. Where do the service levels fall in? When do we get into those? Or should we have done that before reserves? I've just...
It's not on the agenda. We'll squeeze it in. Not right now.
Okay.
Squeeze it in.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure. I think we do need to flip through those maps and chat about that. I just don't want it to be forgotten.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to put, I really don't want to go to day 4 because there really isn't a whole lot left, so.
No, and we talked about, family life balance. I had this day booked off. I got a babysitter at home. I don't want to get another babysitter to try and do this again another day, so let's get it done.
So let's, keep in mind we got 45-ish minutes. So having said that.
Thank you.
Having said that. Reserves.
Through your worship to council, so the first reserves that are provided are the operating reserves. It shows 2016-17 projected, 2018 and 2019 projected in regards to that. So there is, on there you'll note that there is $2.2 million already set aside to pay off the 50th Avenue land. It's about $4.8 million that we have to pay, so part of that payment will be through the Millwright Stabilization Fund and so forth, or we'll find how to do it. These are, I guess, tax smoothing reserves. Transit contingency is just in case something happens and so forth, but generally speaking, they're tax smoothing reserves. Facility management reserves, again, for each of the buildings. These aren't facility replacement reserves. Otherwise, these numbers would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So those are the operating ones. The next set of reserves are capital reserves. These are our capital reserves looking at equipment, infrastructure, future capital, which is general growth. Then we have so there's a total general capital reserves of $6.2 million. There's a municipal reserve, which is MGA, and that is only for the purchase of parkland, and only for the purchase of parkland. It can't be used on anything else, effectively. And then you have your utility infrastructure maintenance reserves. These are reserves that relate to those utility functions. And based on the fund model of accounting, are not to be used on operating. Having said that, council can do what they want, but you'll be breaking up fund accounting rules, but we can leave that at that. Then there's off-site levies. So our off-site levies are there, and they assume projected receipts. There's no guarantee of any receipts. We reflect it from a budget perspective, but I'll use the water off-site levy reserve. In actuality, that reserve is sitting at over or close to $4 million in the hole. $1 million has been set aside as bad debts because the way it works is that reserve gets charged interest. In the 5 years that I've been here, that number has gotten worse. The intent of the offsite levy model should eliminate it. So that's where it is. Unless the model is updated drastically, in the end, this number will have to be funded from somewhere. So those are basically your reserves.
Okay, so I guess the overall arching question is, are we committing enough money to our reserves to meet the guidelines?
Well, if you're on from the operating, we have sufficient room from an operating perspective, so we're okay with that. From the capital, if you look at as amortization as a basis of replacing assets, and you look at the funding opportunities, we should be putting $6.7 million a year in reserves, and we put in about $2 million.
So we're short.
Substantially, but every community in Canada is short.
Okay. Questions? Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Comment through to administration. I have to set this up a bit. Urban canopy. So last year in the budget there was $250,000-ish spent in the budget to do some catch up on our trees. Thereabouts $1,000 a tree to catch that up. I believe increased commitment in service levels to water trees, so we don't get into that squat again. I physically seen that myself. As we talk about reserves, and we say asset replacement reserves, and there's dollar amounts aside those things. Is there any reason why there isn't a asset replacement reserve? Why we don't set money aside for urban canopy? There's huge value to that, and you're looking at me in a perplexed thing because this is outside of the accounting box, but there's huge value in money in our urban canopy that we have. Watering trees, maintaining trees, and all that item. So, how do we account in our accounting system for the value of our urban canopy?
Through Your Worship, presently we haven't accounted for the canopy. Generally speaking, with the exception of the trees being put in at the $120,000 over for 2 years in a row to catch up on some work, they have been put in developers as part of their commitment to the neighborhood. We're working, we started last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, in regards to actually identifying every single tree within the community, caliper size, type of tree, and so forth. So it's in our asset management kind of a deal. So in regards to getting it into accounting, we can get it into the accounting system. It would be a prior period adjustment, and Curtis will say that those are the worst things you can do to put in. It's hard for auditors to do that, but that is something that within our asset management system, there will be a value put on all those and carrying it forward, and it will lay out the replacement side. In regards to putting reserves in for that, the community, prior to even me coming, we did not look at putting money away for the urban canopy. I know the City of Toronto and what the amount their budget is for their canopy and how they track it. It's huge. So yes, we're working on that. All the trees have been identified. We're trying to, focus it down to make sure we have the correct ones in there. And as when the asset management gets into that, picking that up in the trees, we will have numbers. But we're looking at it, yes.
Quick follow-up?
Sure.
So we're only one. We're only, yes, I know the time, but this is important. We're only one strike of disease or one car strike away from death by 1,000 cuts, where we $1,000 ourselves to death every time a resident sees a tree laying down. $1,000 happens every winter. We're only one disease away from a $250,000 line item on here again. So I'm very happy to see you're doing that. I've been at numerous events this year, some on behalf of council, some personally through my day job. The value of urban canopy and quantifying that is real. It's something that needs to end up on the accounting system. Thank you for that.
Councillor McGowan.
Thank you. I got a simple question and then I'll start with my simple question. So capital reserves, basically what you're telling me is the municipal, so the MGA piece and the utility infrastructure, we can't even count that. That is specific for that. So what you're telling me, our capital reserves for everything else, assets, is 6.2. Is that what you're saying?
If you take the utilities out and the municipal reserve, that's correct.
So, again, theme library, $18 million. Thank you. Not saying we're going there. So my other question is, again, simple guy, trying to ask a simple question. We say in this budget that the 2% increase goes to mill rate stabilization fund. Can you explain the difference between putting 2% into that mill rate stabilization fund versus putting it into reserves? Again, in my simple mind, it's saving for the future, but so just explain that.
So in regards to the 2% that when we started, that was generated by the tax, was put into the reserve, not necessarily into the mill rate stabilization reserve. It's been like, if we look at last year when we put, I think it was $758,000, that all went into a capital reserve and is continuing to go into a capital reserve. This year when doing the budget, because of looking at the 5-year projection, that number was just set aside while we have this discussion right now in regards to figuring out what you guys wanted to add more or less into the budget from an operating perspective, which would then, based on what we've done, is effectively taking that $359,000 and put it to zero, because we're almost at that 2% again. It would cover that number. So that's the reason we don't budget to put into the mill rate stabilization fund.
Okay, so maybe could I ask it a different way? If I'm trying to explain this to someone and they say, why are you putting in a 2% tax increase? And I say, the 2% tax increase is going into reserve. So
that would go into a capital reserve.
That would go into a capital. So this right now we are, and I get we've got to calculate everything out. But right now, what we're saying is that the 2% is to go into. It's not to pay for anything additional. The 2% increase right now, it goes straight to a capital reserve. I'm just trying to get my language right.
I would say in the budget that it's reflected, that was presented to you, the initial was, yes, the 2% would have went into capital. But when we were going through the analysis of what we did, we reduced in the sense that if you were just focusing on the 2% as the tax increase, we took the 379,300 less the 359,000, and we started with 22, which effectively eliminated that 2%. So right now, unless you add another 2%, there's nothing going into the capital.
We're going to go through that taxonomy of the things that we added.
Next steps.
So, and the reason I'm asking is that all people, the general public, and I definitely include myself in this, they see the whole number, 2%, right? So I got the answer that I needed, and we'll figure out what that number is at the end, but thank you.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Harris, you did talk about offsite levy accounts, and if it's too soon to go there?
No, this is the time.
Just want to raise that in the back of my head, I remember that I believe now it's possible for, maybe it always has been, for municipalities to look at including different services in those off-site levy accounts, so softer services, maybe it's recreation facilities or something like that. I know we talked about that in the last term. I don't think this council has yet had that information. I'm wondering if that, I don't expect we can go through that now, given the time and place, but is there some way that we can, if we're talking about cash that may or may not be available, I'm just wondering if that can be brought forward.
Integrated Growth and Infrastructure are reviewing. I know both Ms. Lewin and Ms. Raymond are looking at that. They are trying to finalize with the 3 existing right now, and discussion has been on the other areas. So yes, they are looking at it, and it will be coming back to council.
Okay, because there is potential other
And there's
revenue there.
Great, yeah, just chiming in, there is great discussion currently going on among mayors right now as to what each municipality is doing, and so, yeah, I expect that conversation to ramp up.
And if I could add to this, the bigger picture, whether it's franchise fees or this, I've heard provincial governments say before that municipalities are leaving money on the table and they want to get it from us. So I think we have to look at it both ways. We have to look at it from our perspective as well as from theirs, and see where that place in the middle is.
Yeah, it's a really complicated.
It's a tough, I know, but I just want to mention that the bigger picture does include that.
Councillor Hendricks.
Yeah, and just quickly then, we used to have a gift levy program, and of course that found its way into a courtroom, so hopefully there's some other way to get those dollars.
Okay, seeing no further discussions on reserves, capital grants.
Before you is just a quick thing of how the capital grants are coming forward. Please note that 2019 allocations will be officially confirmed in the spring of 2019. They should be very close to that. They may be higher. They're only guaranteed until 2020. The federal gas tax is only guaranteed until 2023, i.e. it drops off in 2024. Both the financial plan, the multi-year budget, and the multi-year capital reflect that the grants are going forward. Having said that, it's in the provincial and the federal government's hands as to whether they do.
All right, this is where I usually jump up on my soapbox again, but I think enough said.
So that's where the grants are.
Quick questions, Councillor Newkirk.
Quick question, just it was alluded to earlier in discussions around the level of effort it takes to keep applying for all these grants. Would administration be able to comment on the level of staffing it takes to keep all these grants going?
Through Your Worship, for these grants, there's no difficulty in applying. They're all online. It's based on the information that we do in the budget. I go on, I apply for them. It's the other grants.
Okay.
It's the grants, the additional grant you're looking for, the BSRC. It's the CARES grants. It's those grants that there is more time. The requirement is onerous on staff to do it. When it comes to the MSI grant and the federal gas tax grant right now, it is not onerous.
Perhaps I saved my question for the wrong section. When would the right time have been to ask that one?
That would have been, the right time would have been the operating when we were talking about the grant funding at the front end. But having said that, that's where doing those grants, they're a lot more complicated, and the requirements are high because of, especially when it's outside of the federal gas tax ones. Any of the federal grants, given past experience, is they want everything dotted and crossed before you start or spend a dollar. And if you spend a dollar before you do that, it's almost impossible to get the grant.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. It's a good question to ask, but honestly, the granting system and how we apply is the world we live in, and it's not going to change by any questions of debate that we're going to have here. So we're just going to have to live with it. Councillor Margoff Swain.
Thank you. MSI, I was under the impression that they combined it all, roughly $5.7 million, and as council we decided to put half of that towards the new rec centre. I see down here, if I'm reading it correctly, that 5.7 minus that, plus a few other things that we're adding in, $1.4 million left.
Yeah.
so the government right now is trying to talk about figuring out how they're going to move forward with that. Is it not a use it or lose it kind of scenario? Would we, like if they said it runs it till the end of 2019, should we not be spending it up? Or like if they're going to replace and restart a new program, are we going to lose the ability to spend that money and they're just going to repurpose that, therefore we lose that
Generally speaking, in the past, what they've done with grants is you don't lose it. They give you a time period from the time they end the grant. Example is the Alberta Municipality Improvement Program. Had a 10-year framework to spend the money within. So the grant funding, the money coming in will end, but the money that exists there is still for the town, and they'll give you a limited time to spend it. So that will come out with whether they continue the grant or not. They'll introduce what those timelines are.
Okay, so in layman's terms, if they come up with another fun acronym, MSI will still be there. We'll have a part of that new framework will say you've got X amount of years to spend the rest of your MSI.
That's what I anticipate.
Thank you.
Councillor Daniluk, good question, by the way.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Harris, please, if you can help me explain to me on this particular chart here, the federal gas tax, for example, is showing a balance at Jan 1 of 625. So the way I'm reading this is we're going to get $1,010,000 in 2019 in gas tax, which we're going to allocate towards the new rec center, leaving a balance of 625. Does that mean we have 625,000 of unspent gas tax? That's how I read that. Am I correct? Am I missing something?
That is correct right now. So there was, with the grants, looking at the additional grant funding possibility for, I want to say the acronym, but I'll spell it out, BSRC. I did not, the 1.4 million and the 625 were sitting there to advance potential funding sources, and depending on where we're going. So the intent is, and coming back once I know where we're going on that grant, is to take that 625. It can be used to do the water projects that Ms. Loon has proposed. I can fund that. But in the same breath, the idea is potentially reducing the amount of the debt on the Aquafit Phase 2 BSRC, and so forth. So that is, it's there. So there will be a little bit more work, but it is available. I just needed to get a final take on where we were with the other grants relating to the BSRC.
Thank you. So my understanding was correct, that there is 625,000 of unspent gas tax, so we can allocate any way we want to. Into capital reserves, debt repayment on the new rec center.
Well, in regards to the debt repayment in itself, it's a very complicated formula. You can, and how it works is for another day. So no, not necessarily there. It would be to reduce the amount we borrow if we put it against it. And from the federal gas tax, it is the only one that, outside of MSI, which you can spend on anything. It's the only federal grant out there that you can really truly spend on recreation. Recreation.
So council today or down the road could decide to take that 625 and put it into capital reserves?
No, you can't put it into capital reserves. You have to identify a project. So
So it is project specific. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further requests, debenture financing.
Yeah, so on the financing, gives you a list of all the outstanding debt, and then in regards to, as of September 18th, the amount that is available, which is about $18 million. Just to let you know that the revenue number is the basis, and it's based on the previous year's revenue. Part of that revenue number is off-site levies coming in, so that number can fluctuate, and because it's at a 1.5, if we collect $1 million less on off-site levies, that number will go down by $1.5 million. So it's a fluctuating number. It's how much you collect in the previous year that is the basis. But it looks at the current, when you do the, when we go in for collecting the money for the loan that we've approved, the debenture we've approved, you look at what's available. So do it before the 2018 budget's done. And then you look at what the actual debt at that day is to offset it. So this is just a point in time. It changes monthly.
Questions, concerns? Councillor Daniluk?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Harris, so towards the bottom of the graph, new arena, there's 3 entries, all expiring in 2020. Is that the BRAC 2 or the second rink of Ken Nickel? That's going to be expiring, that debt?
Yes, that's what it is. Those are the numbers that are going to go towards reducing the tax costs of the BSRC for those debentures. That was part of the analysis that was provided to council. I believe it's about $209,000 principal and interest. So that's going to, they will fall off, but then you have the BSRC that's going to come in. And so going in 2020 on, that's going to reduce the amount that's necessary that we have to raise taxes for. And it's all been calculated in the budget.
Okay.
I know I've lost you. I can, I'm more than willing to.
I had that headlight look, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm more than willing if you want to come in and I can explain it, or we can do it at a committee of the whole.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Hendricks.
Your Worship, and just to piggyback on that, so we've got the operating reserves, capital grants, debenture financing, operating budget, capital project carry forwards, and the capital budget. Do you do a cash flow forecast for the year?
For the year or for going out to 2015? So in regards to the cash flow project for the year, yes, there is done. It's done through part of this budgeting process in regards to where it is. In the 5 or the 10-year multi-year capital plan, that's where the cash flow is for all the reserves coming in, reserves going out, the interest expenses going in there. That has that laid out there kind of deal. So yes.
Do you have one master sheet that takes you from today to the end of budget cycle?
From today to the end, but month by month? No, not month by month.
Okay, because your intake comes
halfway through the year. So right now we're okay in regards to that, yes.
Right, but we also added the payment plan option, right? As far as dollars come into the tax.
Yeah, coming in, we know that.
Which allows us to spread that out.
Yes,
so,
exactly,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so seeing no further, let's take a quick 2-minute peek at the service level maps, because I think that I'm hoping that it's just wording issues and not greatly increasing service levels, because that's going to have a major impact on our budget and we'll be into day 4. So, questions on the service level maps? Councillor Hendricks.
Worship, just on the street sweeping piece and 50th Street northbound.
Which page are you on?
And I'll go to 52.
52?
The shoulders and the cyclists that travel up and down that road. Just wondering if the service level is adequate, or do we need to put some more horsepower into that? It seems once it rains a bit and then we get contractors with their trucks working their way up and down off muddy sites, they find their way onto the shoulders, and it's and I've heard from people, so I just wonder if there's some way to up our game on the shoulders.
Ms. Lewin?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to members of council. So right now, the way that, the 50th Street portion you're talking about is north of 510 to our boundary? Okay.
Yes. Yep.
So we do sweep those shoulders in the springtime, and then we do go out all through the community during other times, just, if there's debris and things like that. And we do have a item when a builder is here that they have to pay $75 per lot. So that money is used to then sweep around when things like that happen. So when construction vehicles are leaving their job sites and there's mud flying everywhere, then we can use that money to fund our street sweeper to go out and collect all that.
So it's on a as-needed basis?
As-needed basis, you bet.
Okay.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Any questions on any of them, or?
Yeah.
Service level maps, street and trail sweeping. Administration, are you able to confirm, do we own all the equipment we need to do our street sweeping, or do we contract anything out?
We own all of the equipment. We have one street sweeper that can accommodate all of the streets, and then we do have 2 units that are on the trail sweeping full-time, and then there's another one if we require it.
Thank you. If we move to page 50, can I just go through here?
Keep going,
Okay,
yeah.
through page 53 of 81, roadway ice control. Our boundary and periphery roads, when I look at 241 and 243 north-south, and the different entrance points to those, there's a lot of T intersections there, and I spend a lot of time on those roads, and I see a lot of people that have slid right through those Ts and north-south, and we're yellow on the range roads vertically north-south, but we are typically red east-west. I would suggest that each of those crosses or Ts should turn red rather than red only east-west and yellow north-south, seeing as how we're at those intersections anyways.
So 241, 243 at 510.
Yeah, 510 and 50th Ave and even the southwest corner, 625. So if you look, all the east-west on 510, 50th Ave is red leading up to the 241, 243. But then vertically on 241 and 243, at each of those points, it's yellow.
And the truck's there anyways.
And the truck's there anyways. In the northeast corner by Calgado Stables, 3 times in the last 4 years, I have the lady's number in my phone because there's vehicles in there, because of running that and slipping through. So I don't know what the appetite to make suggestions on the fly is, but
is that a minor change that can be adjusted, or is that major?
No, it is a minor change, and I mean, you can see, we just have, any of the red zones, we have to have them completed within 8 hours, and the yellow is within 12, so it's a 4-hour gap. It's not, it's not a big deal, so it could be changed.
Thank you for considering that. Keeping going here. Page 59 of 81, into the flower shrub bed weeding and watering. I'm gonna make 3 comments here. The first one would be, I suggest that we look at the timing of when we do our spraying in the community. I know that we received some direction on when to do that, and we do it at what we deem to be the most cost-effective time. What I've observed, and if I've observed incorrectly, let me know. What I've observed is the majority of the spraying actually happens after the summertime is over, when people are done with the summer use of the fields, which I understand. The converse argument to that is if we did it before people use the fields, then there's less dandelions to slip, trip, and fall on. Comment on that first piece here.
Mr. Hiltz.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. The reason it's done in the fall is you have actually the most impact on the weed. If you do it in the spring, it's going to come back. If you do it in the fall, you've killed it for the next year. So that's why, so we're always playing that catch up. So it always perceives, so we've done a lot of areas and we're continuing to do this, and we've improved the quality of weed control in the community exponentially over the last few years. So that's why we're always kind of doing it in the fall.
For sure, yeah, no, I'm well aware of the life cycles there. The challenging point is equally as easy to make, is that those seeds which get planted during the year then sprout in the spring. So, when you're not hitting it at the spring and the fall, like the town is playing a whole bunch of catch up, for sure. And I agree that we are making inroads because I see it physically myself, but I challenge the fact that, we would get faster if we did more, if, the weeds that pop up in the spring. Second point is, I think that we have a challenge in front of us right now to meet the service levels that we've put on this map here. The one piece I know, for instance, would be on Reichert Drive in the northeast. There's a little blue dot in there. There's a park which I drive by every day all summer, and that I've stopped myself on the road and went and pulled 3-foot high thistles out of that thing for the last few years. When I door knocked in that area, there was people saying, if you're elected, can you get me some Roundup and I'll go take care of it myself? So anyways, that's one example that I can suggest, and it is tongue-in-cheek, but I think we have a challenge right now to actually meet the service levels on the weed and watering map, and I do very much respect the fact that there's catch-up being played in the weed side of it. So And then the third piece would be to Councillor Barnhart's comments around the sidewalks and stuff. The north-south portion of the sidewalk on Reichert, directly adjacent to Purple Park and that soccer field, there's grass and weeds in there that if you don't trip on the sidewalk crack, you definitely trip on the grass and weeds. And I would suggest that in areas where, when you're documenting and looking for service levels and looking to judge whether or not something is or is not part of replacement, I would challenge that when we have weeds and grass sprouting up in between the sidewalks enough that you can trip on it, that we should be controlling that with a non-selective herbicide.
Fair enough. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. If I could ask the administration, Ms. Lewin, could you clarify around the golf course area? I think I see blue, so it's priority 2 around the perimeter of the town's boundary. Well, not the town's boundary anymore, but
page you on?
I'm sorry, I'm on page 56 of 81. Trail and sidewalk snow plowing. I think my memory serves me correctly. There's some kind of a joint agreement around the area that's to the south of the golf course, which is actually sidewalk, and I don't see it plowed all the time when it needs to be, and there are a lot of walkers in that area. So I'm just wondering whether that blue line does not continue around the bottom of the golf course, the southern part of the golf course, in the residential area because of some agreement that the golf course is supposed to do it. That's where I'm just wondering why we have blue around the outside on 510 and the Range Road, but we don't have it on the sidewalks. And what I see happening is people using that as a loop for exercise, and so I'm just wondering whether or not, and there's baby carriages, et cetera, that are going through there. Is that something we could do or look into?
Ms. Lewin.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Barnhart. So that section that you're talking, so that's Country Club Drive?
Not only, it's also that would be Colonial, sorry. It would also be part of Colonial Way.
So our responsibility for trail and or sidewalk removal would be on that periphery. So it would be the trail that isn't adjacent to anybody's property. So when it comes to that piece along Country Club Drive or anything on Colonial Way, it's the responsibility of that property owner that's adjacent to it. So the golf course would be responsible for clearing the snow on the north side of Country Club Drive.
And for the other.
And the residents for the other.
I guess the conundrum I have is that when we talk about our trail system, it's not always connected. And so people are using sidewalks as trails, and they don't have that same access sometimes, again, because of the residential piece. So I hear your point, and we may have to do something about that in the future.
Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Worship. Two questions, if you don't mind. The first question, while we're on the same page as Councillor Barnhart, which is on page 56, just a quick thing. How often do we follow up on snow removal on these blue sections? And I'll tell you why I'm asking. Most of you have been to my house, and you know, as you come onto our cul-de-sac, there's a walkway that goes easterly up to the next street. I can't recall. I'm on Champlain Place, and streets beside us, I can't remember the name of it offhand, but every snowfall, I clean the entire sidewalk with my snowblower for all my neighbors. Just something that I do when they buy me a beer and we call it even. But I can't recall one time last winter, honestly, where that walkway between my cul-de-sac and the street beside me was cleared after 2 or 3 days. It's always not been cleared. I'll show on the map after we're done talking, but I do it myself because I've got a snowblower. I can just do it. I'm already there. But there's been a couple times it's been at least 2 days and still not cleaned. So if it is indicated as being blue on the map, meaning after priority 1 has been completed, so how often do we check to be sure that that's actually being followed up on? What's our monitoring
So it's more of a quality control question you're asking, because the intention is do 1, do 2, be done.
Right.
After pretty much every snowfall, but so quality control, I guess, is the question being asked.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Daniluk. So right now, how it is every operator has their map, and every operator has their kind of task list and their priorities that they are doing. So I guess in previous years where we've only had one individual on the trail systems, and then we moved it to 2, and now we'll actually have additional support with our winter term casual operators. So right now, I would say that the quality control would be based on those operators getting their tasks done and literally paper, highlighter, and highlight where they've been. And then the team lead is out and about and we'll check, I guess, the quality of the work, but that's kind of where it is now. I can't speak to why that trail or that sidewalk connection wasn't completed. I'd have to check in and look at last year's information.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up question?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. It's not any of the service level maps in our package here, but can you just refresh my memory, please, briefly, if you could, on what is our mosquito control policy within Beaumont? How often we spray for mosquitoes, if we do at all, and just a brief point on that, if we could.
We do not spray for mosquitoes.
We don't?
No.
No. Okay, I didn't think we did, or we do.
No.
No mosquito control presently.
There's
service
no
level.
mosquito control.
Thank you.
Councilor Newkirk?
Yeah, I was saving this comment for close to the end of the service level area. The mayor brought it up, quality control. One of the things that I believe in is that you can't expect unless you inspect. So I think it's prudent for administration to, as I said, be able to follow up on this. I think we're giving some resources at every front. So some inspections of the work expectations throughout the year, depending on the different service levels and the different seasons, will be prudent. And I would like to leave that with you. Thank you.
Fair enough. So, service level conversation looking complete leads us back to next steps and the conversations surrounding franchise fees and tax increase. So, I know we're riding on the bare edge of time. Are we going to complete or?
Yeah.
See how? Okay.
Through your worship, before you is the analysis that was requested on franchise fees, both electricity and gas. The town / soon-to-be city of Beaumont is at 5% and 21.2%. Fort Saskatchewan's at 0. City of Leduc is at 16 and 27. As indicated, they also have a rate of 35, but generally that wouldn't be applicable for us. So it's the 27. Spruce Grove is 20, and they have a different arrangement when it comes to gas, totally different. So it's not factored into this calculation. It's done differently. Stony Plain is at 20 and 30. Devon is at 13, and again, Devon owns and maintains their own gas service line. So when the average, if you just look at it, the average of the ones where there's a percentage, including Fort Saskatchewan, for electricity it's 13.8 and 19 for gas. But when you factor out Fort Saskatchewan, it's 17 and a quarter and 28.5. So there is room to grow.
Okay, so Councillor Monkhouse-Swain.
And sorry to put you on the spot, but could you just, so I support increasing them. I said before, I think you've given us a good average, and so I would put that on the table that we go to 17.25 and 28.5. Could you just provide the dollar amount that would potentially be associated with that?
If you give me 2 seconds, I will have that number for you.
So we can have the discussion while you do that?
We can have a discussion while he's looking. So, getting back into my mic. So, I agree with Councillor Monkhouse-Swain from a couple of sections ago about fiscal prudence and putting aside for capital. And if through budget adjustments we've allowed the 2% to go, this is another way to increase our capital. And we can also talk about property tax increase in a minute. But yeah, I'm sort of in favor of small bumps. I'm not sure I'm willing to go in one leap all the way to what the averages are, but in principle I support pumping the franchise fees up and then having it allocated towards our capital reserves that we know we're $4 million a year short on is where I would suggest we put them. But discussion, Councillor Van Newkirk.
Just to add to that, something very simple but is often more profound than you think. If we don't make a change here, then you can't do things the way you've always done it and expect to have a different outcome. So I think we need to. If we want to have a different outcome, and I think it's very clear that this council hasn't avoided a difficult conversation yet, and nor will this council avoid those difficult conversations into the future, because quite frankly, if we're in it to make a decision, we're going to do that. So that's my point.
Do you support?
Do you support or not?
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. To conclude, I would support bringing franchise fees up towards that average. If the average is the end goal, and that's what the group agrees upon, we can talk about how we get there based on consensus. So, in theory, raising franchise fees, I support. Let's talk about the mechanism to get there.
Yeah. Councillor Hendricks.
Your Worship, just to Mr. Harris, if this money is earmarked strictly for capital, what happens to us budget-wise?
If it's earmarked specifically for capital,
Strictly for capital.
You're sitting at just about a 2% tax increase after you've done all your adjustments.
But how do you use the money currently? I guess is where I'm going.
Oh, it's all goes into general revenue.
That's right. So, and I knew that, so that's why I'm kind of asking. So leading you down the road. So what happens if we say no more general and now specific to capital?
I would suggest that the 5 that's always going to general stays in general, and the increase goes to capital.
That's my point.
If that's what you're getting at.
That's right. That's kind of where I'm going.
No, good point.
Yeah.
Thanks. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks to my colleagues, because I did take this under my homework was to look into it when I got home last night, so it was a long night. But I did look into what other municipalities are doing, and while one of my concerns will be how it's talked about, and I trust that we'll put it out there and explain it to our residents as to what it is, and make sure that it's not seen as something that just happens and we can blame others for it. I want to make sure we take ownership for doing this. I also think that if we identify it for reserves or however capital we choose to do, that gives me comfort as well, because then we're tying it to, there's a reason why we're doing this. It's not just taking cash because it's on the table. And how much certainly depends what Mr. Harris tells us in terms of what percentage we go to. Because I do know it's passed on, and we all know that. It's passed on, and it's just another form of collecting dollars from our residents. So I want to make sure we have a purpose in doing that, and I see that it is all over the map. I did look into Chestermere, and they've identified over the next 10 years that it's going to go towards major repairs or replacement of municipal infrastructure. I think that's one way we can go, or identify the source of it. And I appreciate that Councillor Hendricks brought up that point, because I hadn't thought of that we want to make sure we don't shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
Like I say, any motion that goes forward, I say only the increase goes towards capital. Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Mr. On that same point, we talked about it last night, and I agree that the current 5% and 21 stays in operating where it is now. The overage goes strictly to capital reserve, and I'm okay with going to the 17.25 average. And that's what you said, Councilor McCall-Swain. You're going to 17.25 and 28.5?
In one fell step. That's 12% increase on your electric. Like, I'm not going to support going all the way in one step.
Let me just, what's the math on that there?
That's the math.
Okay.
So just in terms of the process, if you want to go, every time you go incrementally, the AUC needs to go out and do the whole consultation piece again. So just throwing that out there, that takes time, that's a process.
Yeah, I'm okay with them working. So we have proposed numbers. We're just going to wait for Mr. Harris to give us what those dollar figures are, but right now we're proposed to go one step to average.
They're up there. What I'm trying to find is the analysis I can provide you. It's
Councillor Stout, comments while we're reading?
My comments are broadly aligned with what we've just discussed. I'd certainly support raising the franchise fees to the regional average and using the extra revenue so raised to put into capital reserves. However, I'm going to ask you the question. If you're not in favour of doing it in one step, how many steps would you suggest? How long will this process take?
Well, for me, I was prepared, like, until I saw those averages, I was prepared to go to 10% electrical and like 23 or 24 on the gas. My thinking hasn't really changed on that too much, so.
So that would be two steps then?
2 steps, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'd support doing it in increments, actually. I think the size of the change is large enough that we should take some of the shock out of it by doing it incrementally. Yes.
Councillor McGowan-Swain?
So when you say increments, you say we apply to go increment 2019 and then...
And 2020 again.
2020 again?
Yeah.
Divided in 2?
Like, I don't mind, I think we should get to the regional average. I just don't think we should go whole hog. I mean, that's a heck of a burden to put on our taxpayers, so. And I think 2 increments is...
I can support two increments.
Councillor Barnhart?
Thank you, Worship, and I would like to see the impact on an individual user, right, to be able to, before I vote on that,
That's going to be tough because it's based on the variable charge on your particular...
Well, just on an average, because I know I've seen that in some places where we've had that before. I think we had it previously. But again, on the averages, we're taking Fort Saskatchewan out of there because they have 0. I'm not sure that I understand the logic behind that, because the average would be 13%, not 17.
Because they have different models.
Pitcher plant, I've got Shell Sculpture.
Well, Devon does as well, so we're not taking Devon out. I'm just like the logic of that.
Yeah.
Sorry. The reason why we take, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, it's not my place to explain. Maybe.
Well, the reason that we take Fort Sask out is because it's not a fair comparator because they don't charge anything, in my opinion, but I could be wrong.
The reason Fort Saskatchewan was taken out is that when you look at their non-residential to residential tax assessment tax base, which determines their tax rates, and there's no comparison.
They won't.
Yeah.
16%?
They're really, I don't know the exact number, but
They have
there's
a
no
split we can only
comparison.
dream of.
6% going.
It's more than 50, certainly. Yes. I think I saw 58 last I looked.
Councillor Danlock. Sorry, are you finished, Councillor Barnhart?
It depends on the number.
Okay, we'll come back. Councillor
For
Danlock.
consensus, I could support a 2-step implementation. Let's just pick a number for the first year or
Well, halfway.
second year.
We're halfway.
Halfway. So just to be clear then, I think it was 5 for us right now. It's going to go to 17 and change. We're at 21 now. It's going to go to 28, so it'd be
So it'd be
24,
11-ish and 24-ish, 25-ish.
Yep, I can live with that.
So just so council knows, before you is what has been sent out to us in regards to electricity. And they come out and their recommendation is 7%. That's how this comes. So they say it's a 2% increase. I think going to the commission, and again, I haven't gone through that process here, and maybe if Mike can speak to if they did it during his time at Hinton, is that they may frown upon going at a higher level than this and phasing it in more for the ratepayers, because you got to remember it has to go through the Utilities Commission.
You're saying we should go to 7?
I'm just saying that I don't know what the reaction will be from the Utilities Commission.
Sorry.
They have the say. That's not to say that they won't let us do it. I'm just saying.
Yeah, so I've been in front of the Utilities Commission before arguing completely different things, but we haven't done anything in 20 years, so that's your counter argument, right?
Okay,
So
here we go. Yep.
I think what we
give it a whack.
Give it a whack.
It turns down.
Yeah.
Thank you.
CO?
Since Alan or Mr. Harris referred to me, my experience is they have the thresholds, and provided you stay in them, they don't object. If we're going to jump it up by a huge number, we're going to wear it, and that's kind of their philosophy, but maybe that's changed.
Okay. So, proposal on the table. I want to get a vote on this one. So,
My question is, what is the impact on the average consumer? Give me a
know?
ballpark here, something. So what you're proposing is 11%, 24%. What does that mean when we get our bill?
If somebody has a bill, I can give you an answer real quick. It all depends on how much you use within. So effectively, the franchise fee is going to go, if you're going to go the full 17 to full 17 and a quarter, your portion is going to triple. That's really, so it'll be a triple of what you're paying for the municipality.
For the franchise fee?
Yeah, we'll triple.
So it's going to double, because that's what we're proposing right now.
Yeah, if you're going to go halfway, it's going to double.
Based on usage, right?
Again, I'm just saying, based on whatever my bill is right now.
Your answer's right. I just think
Yeah.
it's unfair to try and summarize it like that.
Yeah.
It's based on,
We're talking about an average of an average to begin with, and then after that, your increase is going to be on the increase. So it's, we have to be careful how we say that, because the way it could be inferred is that your bill is going to triple. Well, that's not the case.
Oh, no, and what I'm saying is,
Yes.
it's the franchise fee portion is going to triple. At the maximum. Yeah.
So
which is a percentage of a percentage, so it's really low. So right now, if you're looking at $3 for natural gas, and you go up by 7% or a third, you're going to add $1 to that. So now it's going to be, if that is $3, you're paying 20% on $3 is 60 cents, and you're going to add 20 cents to your bill.
So, pull us up to why we had this conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
We had this conversation because we compare ourselves to tax rates to these other communities. We wonder why they can charge a lower tax rate, and the reason is because they have a higher franchise fee, right? So whether it's 20 cents, 40 cents, dollars, right? That's the level of why we started having this conversation.
Yep, understood.
okay, so the motion on the floor is to move to halfway of the average as presented. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? Sorry.
Can I just start, if you're going to vote, can you just explain why?
I don't think anybody's going to vote no. I'm not voting no. Councillor Stout.
I was just going to ask do we want to round these numbers? Do we want to go from 5 to 10%?
No, let it go halfway and be exact.
Okay.
As we get that number actually is.
11.125% for the 5%, and then for the other one is 7.3, so that's going to be 25, I think, something, so.
Yeah.
Just so we know.
Just so you know.
Yeah.
So 11.125.
Yeah, and the other one I'm just doing right now, 6.5, so 3.65 would be 24.85, I believe, if I've done my math correct.
Okay. There you go.
Is this motion for, sorry, is this motion for the, do we need it 2 steps or just the 1 step?
Well, it's moving in 1 step this year, and we'll motion again next year to go the 2nd step.
So just the 1 step?
Yeah. All in favor? Councillor Hendricks?
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion is to increase the franchise fees for electrical from 5 to 11.125, and for gas from 23, I can't remember the numbers, 23.7 to 24.85.
Impact roughly is cents.
Yes.
Well, it depends on, that's per cents per gigajoule that you use, right? So it's $3 cubic meter or whatever it is on the market right now. So if that's what depending on what you're actually being charged. So you take, you take 21% of $3 is 60 cents, 63 cents. And so you're going to add another 3% on that. So you're talking, what, 9 cents? Yeah, as a per gigajoule. Yeah, so 3 cents per, yeah.
Waiting for you to vote. Everybody voted, just wait. Okay, so that carries unanimously. And so I guess the last we have to talk about is the 2%. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, just to tie to this, to the capital projects, the one item that's generally never discussed is the construction means index, which is driving the math on all these capital projects. It's important to know that, you know, that index is higher than generally the inflationary rate. And when you have a project that is a must need and should go, and you now delay it month over year over time, you're being punished by the construction means index, and you can't catch it. Like, there's no purpose. If you need the project, you got the capital, you should go, because you're just going to pay percentage-wise that much more. And so we're taking these dollars to actually attack the construction means index.
Yes.
Right? That's what we're doing.
We're attacking the...
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Councilor Barnhart, final question.
And I would just add to that, in terms of the messaging that's going out, I think it's important when the mayor is, again, speaking to the need for provincial sustainability and dollars, that the municipalities are doing everything they possibly can to spread the pain, if you will, about raising taxes and everything else, so that we're trying to meet the needs. So it's part of, I think, our overall advocacy effort.
I agree.
To do what we can. If we've left it on the table, then we're to blame for that. So, thank you, and appreciate the conversation.
Okay, and so I think the last item on the agenda is to look at the tax increase. So looking at the 2%, we had it originally going to, if I'm correctly heard what Mr. Harris said, when we first started the budget, that tax increase was originally proposed to do what we both just did with the franchise fees growing up. We have since adjusted the budget into these, not there yet, into the line items and the things that we just talked about, and we're sitting at...
1 second, I'll have it. I was playing, my apologies.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know.
There we go, 1.88.
So we're sitting at 1.88. And so the question is because if we want the original 2 to go back to infrastructure, then our tax increase is, if we keep all this stuff, is 4.88. 3.88. I can do math. So having... We had...
We go to 3.8?
Yeah, so we had 2 originally going into capital. If we add all this, that's 3.88. But because we just put a big whack into a franchise, I say we stick with the 1.88 and move on. But I'm waiting to hear what council has to say. Councilor Margasway?
Again, how you explain this? Are you telling me we have a 3.8% tax increase, or we have a 1.8% tax increase plus a 2% that's going to capital?
We had a 2% that was going to capital. When we started adjusting the budget, they took the 2% for capital out and started from zero. Essentially a 0% tax increase. When we moved down this list, we're now sitting at 1.88. So if we want to put that original 2% that was allocated to go to capital back in, it's 2% plus what's up there.
Okay, so but long story short, this plan proposes, so if I'm a taxpayer, what is my tax going up? It's going up 3.8%.
If we put the 2 back in, yeah.
Yeah, 2% is going to capital reserves plus the franchise fees that we've already talked about, plus 1.8 to cover everything else.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is you're willing to put the 1.8 in, but or leave it at 2.
Leave it at 2, yeah.
So that the tax increase is 2%, and we don't try and tack on the additional piece. Based on the discussion and the numbers seeing around, I would support that. Yeah.
Who's blinking here? Nobody's blinking. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd support that too. I noticed from page 5 of the budget guidelines that the consumer price index per Stats Canada was 2.8%. So I'd like to keep it at or below the tax increase, at or below that level. So
because that's...
I know it's a more complicated calculation.
But
because
that's going to the great work that administration has done to be able to keep it that way, so.
Yes, absolutely. But I noticed also from the survey, if I remember correctly, there was a small majority in favor of a tax increase that was no more than price inflation.
Yeah, it's basically 56-46.
So yeah, as long as we can keep it below about 2.8%, I am comfortable with it.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Danlop?
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. Just to be clear, for the sake of clarity for my own purpose, so if we went with a 2% increase in taxes, 1.88 goes to these additional items, 0.12% goes to capital reserves. Correct?
Original proposal, yeah.
Correct. Okay. So I guess this is where we start doing some nitpicking and some potential swapping in and out. Just throwing it out there for argument's sake, the child care phase 2 study, $125,000, not a small number. I might suggest we don't plant trees for a year. $120,000 we save there, we paid $125 there, we're basically even, right? I'm just saying ways to sort of look at this, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I'm okay with the increase of 2%, 1.88 for our increases here, 0.12% going to reserve, but I think we could lose trees for a year and pay for the child care phase 2 study, which I think is more important than trees, for 1 year.
It is.
I'm just making a point to say.
Well, the 120 was a one-time to get us back.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
I'm going to interrupt on this. My apologies. Thank you to Administrator Mike. Because we have two mics in the office, safety codes office or safety officer Mike and Mike. There are in the green you'll see 1 and 4. So and I was playing around with some other stuff, so I have to apologize. The 1 is a tax increase. The 4 is it's coming out of reserves. So the 125 is already coming out of reserves. If it was coming out of taxes, I'd put a 1 in there, and then you're going to see your taxes go up. Right? So it's already being funded out of reserves. So my apologies for not clearly explaining that. So right now you'll see it goes down because it's being funded out of reserve. And if I make this smaller, you'll be able to see that.
What's the final number you're looking at?
The final number you're looking at is right there. So 2.91, I'm trying to get the reserve to make it to 3%. Isn't that what we're talking about right now? Did you want 2 plus 1 for the increase?
2.
Or did you want 2? What's the number you want?
2.
Whatever the difference is.
Oh, to 2, that's easy because that's zero.
That's too much.
There you go. It's 1.88, so I add, what, $12,000? I don't know.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
It's not a lot of money. Oh, so 20,000.
24,000.
Yeah. So that's, that's playing the get it right to the 2. So that's what those numbers are.
Follow-up from Councillor Danlock?
Sorry, I just lost my train of thought for a second there. So we're still looking at a target of 2% increase, which includes what's in green on the sheet in front of us.
Yes.
But only putting 0.12% towards capital reserves.
Because that's all that's left, yeah.
Right. So we're clear on that. That's my understanding, so despite the changes there. So yeah, so I was just suggesting ways to get that. Yeah, okay. Good enough right now.
Mr. Sturts?
Mr. Harris, the original number that was being transferred to reserve was slightly over 2%, was it not?
No, it was slightly under. It was 359, 100 compared to 379.
Okay, I thought it was 389. Okay.
Councillor Barnhart?
Thank you, Worship. So I want to go back for a minute to what we're doing with the revenue that may come from the franchise fee. Is that not?
That will be an in and out on here, so it's going directly into reserves.
So that is going to capital reserve?
It's going to
Yeah, going directly to capital
So where we're not
reserves.
taking it from taxes, we're taking it from taxes, but it's called a franchise fee.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a municipal tax, it's a franchise.
I'm just being simple,
Yeah.
simple-minded, but I mean, in my mind, we're not missing the point of trying to keep the reserves
No,
growing.
there's 660.
We have another source of revenue.
Going into reserves.
Right.
Through the franchise fees.
So with that, I'm cool.
Yes, so I'll show everyone because I've done that, and I don't know if it was on the page when I was playing with it.
Councillor Van Newkirk?
There's the amount going into reserves.
I was going to walk down that clarity path as well to say that we aren't forgetting about the reserve.
Yeah, that's... Yeah, that's why I'm not.
If we're not doing it on these fronts,
Yeah.
we've done it on one front, and I think that was maybe a goal that we had ahead of time. So thank you.
Fair enough. All right, so seeing no further discussion, I think we're at 2. Councillor Danluck.
Just a quick observation. Mr. Harris, if you could, please, left of the green line, the total cost, what's the total of those 5 or 6 lines in terms of numbers? The 100,000 plus 35 plus 10 plus 81 plus 125?
You go like this. Well, no, you go this one, sorry, the 100. Go these 2.
Sorry, you're right.
And go these 3. Whoops. That's the problem with trying to do it on a screen. So 100, control the food bank, this one, no, not that one. The number is 367,500. Which is really easy. I should have just taken the 387.7 less the 2,200.
So, give me 1 second, just 1 quick minute. Let me just make my point here if I could. So 53.5. What was that number, Mr. Harris, you just mentioned?
It's 367.7, or sorry, 367.5. It's basically the 387,700 less the 20,200, which is the number in gray.
Okay, I guess my point is, I'm just saying it just so I say it. If you add up those numbers and you take the increase in mayor, increase in council, divided by that number of an increase of 2%, 41% of that, it goes towards council remuneration. I'm just saying that's something we need to be aware of, that number, because it's just something that we need to be aware of when we do our stuff.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wonder why we would have to round it to 2%. If 1.88 and we have the reserve being added to through the franchise fee, why not stick with 1.88?
I like round numbers, but
to me, I think it is what it is, and it's not, we're not rounding it up just for the sake of rounding it, and there's some benefit.
And the 0.12 is relatively small, so we could get rid of it and just go with 1.88.
Yeah. I'd propose that.
All in favor of 1.88? Hang on, we'll do it originally. Yeah. Start the vote.
This is like the big finale.
I did, yeah. 1.88, yay! Done. 1.88 is the tax increase. Yeah.
So we actually reduced the tax increase from what was originally proposed.
So the franchise fee gets talked about.
Yeah, so it'll be fine. It's a good budget. Thank you guys for persevering through the process. It gets to be a long 3 days, and I think we did some really good work, and we got where we needed to be. Final comments from the CAO before I adjourn this meeting?
Just 2 comments. One, the obvious process is this is now going to come back to regular, so everything you just discussed today, you're going to have the opportunity to vote on it or rediscuss it, and we'll go out to the public with this base budget. We'll add the few things that everybody asked. What was the second thing I was going to say? Second thing I was going to say is on that list, you identify a resource officer, you identify a couple other positions that may or may not kick in on January 1st, so you may not spend all of that money, and then it goes back into the reserve, so your reserve contribution will still be good. And then there's also the wonderful word called surplus, which then goes back into the reserve. Councillor Moncrossway.
Awesome. Councillor Moncrossway?
Yeah, you said all the thank yous, but to be able to prepare a budget under the Consumer Price Index, really appreciative. Good work. Thank you for listening and taking that direction. There is a good section at the end of your budget that talks about next steps in terms of when the communications are going to go out, when the open houses are. I assume those are tentative, but that gives us a good idea of when this is coming up. So if people are asking you about the consultation piece, the last page on the schedule speaks to that. So thank you.
Seeing no further comments, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.